Chapter 127. Vampire Devil snorted, but there was no fear. Ferocity rose on his withered face, said, "Back then, you righteous people only relied on your numbers. Do you think I am really afraid of you?" As he spoke, he shook his hands, and the skull in front of him that was flickering with red light streaked across the air with a woo sound. It circled around his body at high speed, and his eyes began to gradually turn red. Belize took a deep breath, prepared. 100 years ago, he was already one of the most outstanding people in Jadian. He was one of the main force in hunting down the Falcon. He had fought against Vampire Devil before. He knew that Vampire Devil was not to be underestimated. His art of vampire was not to be underestimated. At this moment, the dark clouds in the sky slowly gathered again. The mark that was torn by Belize's earth-shattering sword had disappeared. The night darkened again. Indistinctly, the sound of sea waves came from afar, mixed with the sound of wind gradually surging. The looming howl, like hidden in the deep sea, softly floated in the night under the sky. Shah Danon slowly woke up. His chest was tight, very uncomfortable. Suddenly he heard someone exclaim. Then a white hand reached out and gently massaged his chest. After a moment, the blood that was stuck in his chest seemed to be unblocked. Even his spirit was much better. Shah Danon raised his head. It was Serene, holding him, smiling without saying anything. His face blushed, said quietly, "Thank you, Serene." Serene said softly, "Are you okay?" Shah Danon nodded, said, "Just a little tired. Nothing else?" Serene smiled and nodded, then suddenly laughed softly. "That's good. Now watch your master vent your anger for you." Shah Danon was surprised. He followed Serene's gaze and was shocked. Under the dark sky, between the gloomy dark clouds, there was a glowing and hot ball of light. It lit up half of the sky. Even the edge of the dark clouds was painted with the light. Belize was like the ancient god of fire, standing proudly in the clouds. The crimson flame turned into a burning flame, turned into a flying fire dragon, tore the dark clouds apart, and soared into the sky. As for Vampire Demon, he was nowhere to be seen. But in the sky, there was a giant skeleton roaring and howling. The wind and clouds changed. There was a dark, bloody light shooting up to the sky, fighting with the fire dragon. The dark clouds in the sky were boiling, rolling, and roaring. From the ground, the two were like the gods and demons, fighting with anger. Shah Danon's heart skipped a beat. He admired his master even more. The roar of the fire dragon shook the sky and earth. It was similar to the fire dragon summoned by Three Tails Fox Spirit with Inferno Mirror in Darkdrake Cave, but it was much more powerful. Just when he was thinking, his body suddenly shook. He felt heat rose from the Inferno Mirror on his right arm, like it was stimulated by something. The heat spread throughout his body. Serene felt it, turned her head, and looked at him. Her eyes were filled with concern, said, "Xiao Fan, why is your body so hot all of a sudden? Is it a fever after the wound?" Shah Danon was surprised. He did not expect Shenyang to be so sensitive. He did not know what to say, mumbled, "No, nothing." Serene frowned. When she was about to ask, she suddenly felt something. She turned around and saw the sound of footsteps in the forest. After a moment, hundreds of people came out from every corner. They were all righteous. Skysong Temple's Fezan, Fashion, Incense Valley's Li Su, Yannon were among them. The one who walked at the front was Master Vaskalo. Serene stood up, smiled. "Vaskalo Shixiang, you guys also came." Vaskalo nodded slightly, said lightly, "Tian Shidi is showing his prowess here. We're not blind or deaf, so we came to have a look." Serene frowned. She felt there was a sting in his words. But before she could say anything, the Bamboo Peak disciples saw Shah Danon's body was covered with blood, his face haggard, sitting on the ground. Tian Linger cried out involuntarily and ran up. Xavion, Dubai Shu, Hidaji's faces were also filled with anxiety and followed behind her. Unexpectedly, they had only run a few steps when suddenly they felt a white shadow flashed. There was actually a figure who was faster than them and dashed up, looking carefully. It was Lin Jingyu. He came next to Shah Danon, crouched down, grabbed his arm. His face was slightly pale, said, "Xiao Fan, are you okay?" Sha Danan felt the worry in his eyes. His heart warmed. He nodded and smiled. "I'm fine, no problem." Lin Jingyu looked him up and down, then glanced at the wound on his chest, then relaxed, let out a long breath, said, "Who hurt you?" Sha Danan pointed upward, said, "It is that heretic. I heard my master called him something like vampire devil." Bei's body shook. It seemed he knew about the devil. He was surprised. That old guy also came out? Then he raised his head and looked up. Hede and others came to Sha Danan's side and asked him questions. Sha Danan looked at Hede's concerned eyes, lowered his head, quietly answered the Shixiang's questions, indicating he was fine. Bei was standing next to Sha Danan. He raised his head and watched for a while, then suddenly said, "Xiao Fan, I can't believe your master's cultivation is so high." When Tian Linger heard that, she felt angry. Ever since she lost a Lin Jingyu at her doorstep, she had always found this lad to be an eyesore. She snorted and said, "My father's skills are profound. How can you, a Longsho Valley lad, see through it?" Lin Jingyu frowned, turned his head to look, but saw Tian Linger's pressuring gaze. Not showing any weakness, could not help but be taken aback, then suddenly smiled and said, "Tian Jr. sister, what you said is right." Tian Linger instead choked for a moment. She did not expect this arrogant youth to suddenly become so well-mannered. But looking at the smile on Lin Jingyu's face, she looked to another direction. She followed Bei's eyes and saw he was looking at Kevern, who was standing next to Master Vaskalo. They were smiling at each other. How intelligent was Tian Linger? In a blink she knew that Bei must have been too embarrassed to argue with her, because he had always respected her senior brother Kaheo. Even though she herself did not feel embarrassed, but right now, when her eyes met Kaheo's, she could not help but feel a sweetness in her heart. Suru, who was standing at the side, frowned slightly. She had heard what the juniors had said. The speaker had no intention, but the listener had it in mind. After a moment, she quietly looked at Master Vaskalo. Saw Master Vaskalo looking up, expressionless, but his eyes were bright, his eyes gleaming, staring at Tian Bai's figure, not knowing what he was thinking. At this time, only the howling of the wind was heard. Flames shot everywhere in the sky. Bloodlight rushed to the sky. Obviously, the battle between the two had reached the most critical moment. Taoist Vasp Kalo suddenly coldly said, "Didn't expect this vampire demon to be so daring. Dare to come here and provoke." Kevern was standing next to him. He stepped forward and said, "Master, what are your orders?" Taoist Vasp Kalo glanced at the sky, said, "Your Tian Sherbu's chances of winning are already set. That old devil won't be able to hold on much longer. You bring people to make arrangements around. This time we must not let this evildoer escape." Kevern responded. He waved his hand and called Bei back. He then turned to inform the other sections. Fazan, Li Su, and the rest. They were discussing. Serene slowly walked to Master Vasp Kalo. She smiled and said, "Vasp Kalo Shixiang, why do you think Bai is going to win?" Master Vasp Kalo looked at Serene. His expressionless face revealed a smile. He said, "Su Shimi, are you going to make fun of me, this useless Shixiang again?" Serene shook her head and smiled. "Even if I have 10 guts, I won't dare to make fun of you. I am sincerely asking for advice." Master Vasp Kalo smiled. "Su Shimi, you have always been intelligent. Your aptitude is far better than me, this useless Shixiang. Why be so modest? Vampire Devil's cultivation is not low. He also has the blood skull with him. It looks like the bloodlight is soaring to the sky. But from what I see, although his aura is fierce, the blood-red light at the upper right part of his esper is not pure. The blood skull seems to be slightly damaged. Normally, this is not a problem. With this devil's cultivation, he just needs to go back and refine it. But today, in front of Tian Shidi, this is his biggest flaw." He paused for a moment. There seemed to be a flash of coldness in his eyes, but his voice was still calm. He said, "Tian Shidi, on the other hand, is calm. He uses Qing Yun incantation to control the Crimson Flame celestial sword. He can already form the Crimson Fire Dragon. Although the Blood Skull's red light is strong, it retreated immediately after contact with the Crimson Fire Dragon. and his eyes are sharp. Every move is aimed at the upper right part of the blood skull. Vampire Devil looks arrogant, but in fact, he is already struggling. He will definitely lose. In Su Shimi's opinion, is what I said wrong? Serene smiled. Shi Xiang is wise. I only know it after hearing it from you. Master Vasp Kalo smiled faintly. He turned his head and looked into the distance. He suddenly lowered his voice, but his tone was calm. He said slowly, Su Shimi. Serene said, What? Vasp Kalo Shi Xiang? Lord Vasp Kalo's eyes were still on the two who were fighting fiercely in the sky, but his voice was soft and clear. Ever since Tian Shidi broke through the Jade clear stage of Tai Chi Xianqing Dao 100 years ago, it seems that his cultivation has improved by leaps and bounds. Serene was shocked, but she did not show it on her face. She smiled. Vasp Kalo Shi Xiang, you are overpraising him. Bai is not as talented as sect head Shi Xiang and you. Taoist Vasp Kalo slowly shook his head. His mouth revealed a trace of smile, said, 100 years ago, our good faction defeated the evil faction in one fell swoop. Me and Tian Shidi, Zhang Shidi from Peak of Wind, Shang Shidi from Morning Sun Peak, and Wan from Main Sect. Serene suddenly whispered, Vasp Kalo Shi Xiang. Master Vasp Kalo was shocked. He seemed to have thought of something. He nodded and said, The few of us chased after the evil faction demons. We went deep into the wildlands. At that time, Tian Shidi had already broken through to Shangqing. Wan Shi Xiang. That person said to us, Tian Shidi looks dull, but he is intelligent inside. Especially his will is unwavering. It is rare. In the future, his future in cultivation will be limitless. Chapter 128. Vampire Devil snorted, but there was no fear. Ferocity rose on his withered face, said, Back then, you righteous people only relied on your numbers. Do you think I am really afraid of you? As he spoke, he shook his hands, and the skull in front of him that was flickering with red light streaked across the air with a woo sound. It circled around his body at high speed, and his eyes began to gradually turn red. Tian Belize took a deep breath, prepared. 100 years ago, he was already one of the most outstanding people in Jadian. He was one of the main force in hunting down the Falcon. He had fought against Vampire Devil before. He knew that Vampire Devil was not to be underestimated. His art of vampire was not to be underestimated. At this moment, the dark clouds in the sky slowly gathered again. The mark that was torn by Tian Belize's earth-shattering sword had disappeared. The night darkened again. Indistinctly, the sound of sea waves came from afar, mixed with the sound of wind gradually surging. The looming howl, like hidden in the deep sea, softly floated in the night under the sky. Shah Danon slowly woke up. His chest was tight, very uncomfortable. Suddenly, he heard someone exclaimed. Then a white hand reached out and gently massaged his chest. After a moment, the blood that was stuck in his chest seemed to be unblocked. Even his spirit was much better. Shah Danon raised his head and saw it was Yang Serene, holding him, smiling without saying anything. His face blushed, said quietly, Thank you, Yang. Serene said softly, Are you okay? Shah Danon nodded, said, Just a little tired now, nothing else? Serene smiled and nodded, then suddenly laughed. That's good. Now watch your master get revenge for you. Shah Danon was surprised. He followed Serene's gaze and was shocked. Under the dark sky, between the gloomy dark clouds, there was a blazing and shining ball of light. It lit up half of the sky. Even the edge of the dark clouds was painted with the light. Tian Belize was like the ancient god of fire, standing proudly in the clouds. The crimson flame turned into a burning flame, turned into a flying fire dragon, tore the dark clouds apart, and soared into the sky. As for Vampire Demon, he was nowhere to be seen. But in the sky, there was a giant skeleton, roaring and howling. The wind and clouds changed. There was a dark, bloody light, rushing up to the sky, fighting with the fire dragon. The dark clouds in the sky were boiling, rolling, and roaring. From the ground, the two were like the gods and demons, fighting with anger. Shah Danon's heart skipped a beat. He admired his master even more. The fire dragon was roaring, shaking the sky and earth. It was similar to the fire dragon summoned by Three Tails Fox Spirit with Inferno Mirror in the Darkdrake Cave, but it was much more powerful. Just when he was thinking of that, his body suddenly shook. He felt heat rose from the Inferno Mirror on his right arm, like it was stimulated by something and spread throughout his body. Serene felt it, turned her head, and looked at him. Her eyes were filled with concern, said, "Xiao Fan, why is your body so hot all of a sudden? Is it a fever after the wound?" Sha Danon was surprised. He did not expect Shenyang to be so sensitive. He did not know what to say, mumbled, "No, nothing." Serene frowned. When she was about to ask, she suddenly felt something. She turned around and saw the sound of footsteps in the forest. After a moment, hundreds of people came out from every corner. They were all righteous people. Skysong Temple's Fazan, Fashion, Incense Valley's Li Su, Yan'an were among them. The one who walked at the front was Master Vas Kalo. Serene stood up, smiled. "Vas Kalo Shixiang, you also came." Vas Kalo nodded slightly, said lightly, "Tian Shidi showed his power here, shocking the heaven and earth. We are not blind and deaf, so we can't have a look." Serene frowned. She felt there was a hidden sting in his words. But before she could say anything, the Bamboo Peak disciples saw Sha Danon's body was covered with blood, his face haggard, sitting on the ground. Tian Linger cried out involuntarily and ran up. Xavion, Du Bai Shu, Hidaji's faces were also filled with anxiety and followed behind her. Unexpectedly, they had only run a few steps when suddenly they felt a white shadow flashed. There was actually a figure who was faster than them and dashed up. Looking carefully, it was Lin Jingyu. He came next to Sha Danon, squatted down, grabbed his arm. His face was slightly pale, said, "Xiao Fan, are you okay?" Sha Danon felt the worry in his eyes. His heart warmed. He nodded and smiled. "I am fine, no problem." Lin Jingyu looked him up and down, then glanced at the wound on his chest, then relaxed, let out a long breath, said, "Who hurt you?" Sha Danon pointed upward, said, "It is that heretic. I heard my master called him something like vampire devil." Bei's body shook. It seemed he knew about the devil. He was surprised. That old guy also came out? Then he raised his head and looked up. Hidi and others came to Sha Danon's side and asked him questions. Sha Danon looked at Hidi's concerned eyes, lowered his head, quietly answered the Shixiang's questions, indicating he was fine. Bei was standing next to Sha Danon. He raised his head and watched for a while, then suddenly said, "Xiao Fan, I can't believe your master's cultivation is so high." When Tian Linger heard it, she felt angry. Ever since she lost to Lin Jingyu at her doorstep, she felt that this lad was an eyesore. She snorted and said, "My father's skills are profound. How can you, this Longsho Valley lad, see through it?" Lin Jingyu frowned, turned his head to look, but saw Tian Linger's pressuring gaze. Not showing any weakness, could not help but be taken aback, then suddenly smiled and said, "Tian Jr.'s sister, what you said is right." Tian Linger instead choked for a moment. She did not expect this arrogant youth to suddenly become so well-mannered. But looking at the smile on Lin Jingyu's face, she looked to another direction. She followed Bei's eyes and saw he was looking at Kevern, who was standing next to Master Vas Kalo. They were smiling at each other. How intelligent was Tian Linger? In a blink she knew that Bei must have been too embarrassed to argue with her, because he had always respected her senior brother Kaheo, even though she herself did not feel embarrassed. But right now, when her eyes met Kaheo's, she could not help but feel a sweetness in her heart. Sru, who was standing at the side, frowned slightly. She had heard what the juniors had said. The speaker had no intention, but the listener had it in mind. After a moment, she quietly looked at Master Vas Kalo. Saw Master Vas Kalo looking up, expressionless, but his eyes were bright, his eyes gleaming, staring at Tian Bai's figure, not knowing what he was thinking. At this time, only the howling of the wind was heard. Flames shot everywhere in the sky. Blood light shot up to the sky. Obviously, the battle between the two had reached the most critical moment. Taoist Vas Kalo suddenly coldly said, "Didn't expect this vampire demon to be so daring. Dare to come here and provoke." Kevern was standing next to him. He stepped forward and said, "Master, what are your orders?" Taoist Vasp Kalo glanced at the sky, said, "Your Tian Sherbu's chances of victory are set. That old devil won't be able to hold on much longer. Bring some people to make arrangements around. This time we must not let this evildoer escape." Kevin responded. He waved his hand and called Bay back. He then turned to inform the other sections. Fazan, Li Su, and the rest. They were discussing. Serene slowly walked to Master Vasp Kalo. She smiled and said, "Vasp Kalo Shixiang, why do you think Bai is going to win?" Master Vasp Kalo looked at Serene. His expressionless face revealed a smile. He said, "Su Shimi, are you going to make fun of me, this useless Shixiang again?" Serene shook her head and smiled. "Even if I have 10 guts, I won't dare to make fun of you. I am sincerely asking for advice." Master Vasp Kalo smiled. "Su Shimi, you have always been intelligent. Your aptitude is far better than me, this useless Shixiang. Why be so modest? Vampire Devil's cultivation is not low. He also has the blood skull with him. It looks like the bloodlight is soaring to the sky. But from what I see, although his aura is fierce, the blood-red light at the upper right part of his esper is not pure. The blood skull seems to be slightly damaged. Normally, this is not a problem. With this devil's cultivation, he just needs to go back and refine it. But today, in front of Tian Shitty, this is his biggest flaw." He paused for a moment. There seemed to be a flash of coldness in his eyes, but his voice was still calm. He said, "Tian Shitty, on the other hand, is calm. He uses Qing Yun incantation to control the Crimson Flame celestial sword. He can already form the Crimson Fire Dragon. Although the Blood Skull's red light is strong, it retreated immediately after contact with the Crimson Fire Dragon, and his eyes are sharp. Every move is aimed at the upper right part of the Blood Skull. Vampire Devil looks arrogant, but in fact, he is already struggling. He will definitely lose. In Su Shimi's opinion, is what I said wrong?" Serene smiled. "Shi Xiang is wise. I only know it after hearing it from you." Master Vasp Kalo smiled faintly. He turned his head and looked into the distance. He suddenly lowered his voice, but his tone was calm. He said slowly, "Su Shimi." Serene said, "What? Vasp Kalo Shi Xiang?" Lord Vasp Kalo's eyes were still on the two who were fighting fiercely in the sky, but his voice was soft and clear. Ever since Tian Shitty broke through the Jade clear stage of Tai Chi Xianqing Dao 100 years ago, it seems that his cultivation has improved by leaps and bounds. Serene was shocked, but she did not show it on her face. She smiled. "Vasp Kalo Shixiang, you are overpraising him. Bai is not as talented as sect head Shixiang and you." Taoist Vasp Kalo slowly shook his head. His mouth revealed a trace of smile, said, 100 years ago, our good faction defeated the evil faction in one fell swoop. Me and Tian Shitty, Zhang Shitty from Peak of Wind, Shang Shitty from Morning Sun Peak, and Wan from Main Sect. Serene suddenly said in a low voice, "Vasp Kalo Shixiang." Master Vasp Kalo was shocked. He seemed to have thought of something. He nodded and said, "The few of us chased after a few demons from the evil faction. We went deep into the wildlands. At that time, Tian Shitty had already broken through to Shangqing. Wan Shixiao. That person told us that Tian Shitty looks dull, but he is intelligent inside. Especially his determination is unwavering. It is rare to find someone like him. In the future, his future in cultivation will be limitless." Chapter 129. Someone had already come to support Vampire Demon. That bald old man seemed to be on good terms with Vampire Demon, walked to his side, and whispered something. Ghost King reached out his hand, smiled, but did not speak. His expression was very relaxed, without any feeling of facing a great enemy. The pale-faced scholar, standing beside him, looked at him. "Vasp Kalo, do you still remember your grandfather?" Suddenly, a hoarse voice was heard. The young good faction disciples frowned together. It was that fierce-looking dwarf. Right now, he was staring at Vasp Kalo, his eyes revealing an ominous glint, almost like a ferocious wolf. Vasp Kalo sneered, said, "Evil doer, do you still remember that sword?" As soon as these words came out, everyone could see the dwarf's facial muscles contorting as he gritted his teeth. It was obvious that he hated her to the bone. However, he nodded slowly and used his hand to draw a line across his chest from his left shoulder to the right. He said fiercely, Good, I didn't forget. I didn't expect you to remember too. That's great. This sword, I will naturally return it to you. Vasp Kalo snorted, ignored him. His gaze turned to the two people standing at the side, looking calm. Suru's face was solemn, with her eyes. Naturally, she could tell that these few people's skills were not shallow, not weaker than blood-sucking demon, just now. Most likely they were old devils from the evil faction who had not appeared for a long time. Right now, hearing the conversation between Taoist Vasp Kalo and the dwarf, she softly asked Tian Bui, who was standing beside her, Who are these people? Tian Bai's expression was also not good. His brows knitted together, said, This dwarf is called by Du Zi, from the evil faction Wandu clan. That bald old man is Elder Duanmu of Jiesher Mountain. He has always been a loner in the evil faction. These two people and vampire demon are the remnants of the evil faction that we chased 100 years ago. As for the two people beside them, one seems to be the evil faction Ghost King sect leader that Xiao Yikai mentioned, but that pale-faced scholar, I have never seen him before. Suru inhaled a breath of cold air. 100 years ago, during the good and evil Great War, her cultivation was not complete. She did not go deep into the wildlands with Tian Bui, Tao Song Song, and the rest. But these few people's names were well known, especially by Du Zi and Elder Duan Mu. Their notoriety was even worse than the vampire demon. Just at this moment, that bald old ancestor Duan Mu suddenly turned around, glanced at the good faction people, suddenly screamed, Where's Wan Jinni? Why is that dog Wan Jinni not here? The Jadian young disciples were all startled, did not know what he was talking about, but Tian Bi, Taoist Vasp Kalo, Suru, and the rest suddenly changed countenance. Tian Bui, he coldly said, Wan Shixiang's cultivation is profound. He has already ascended to heaven. Only an evil clown like you, still barking madly here. The few from the evil faction were startled by Du Zi and Elder Duanmu, including Vampire Demon who had just caught his breath, exclaimed, Dead? Ghost King and the pale-faced scholar, who were standing at the side, also seemed to tremble slightly. Wan Jian, this name that had never been mentioned in the younger generation of Qin Yun sect, to these evil faction big shots, it seemed to have a magical power. These people looked at each other with complicated expressions. The hatred on their faces was especially strong, mixed with a trace of fear. However, this could not cover the joy in the depths of their eyes. Ancestor Duanmu had a complicated expression on his face. He used his hand to touch his bald head and mumbled a few words. No one could hear what he said clearly, but the last sentence was rather clear. I didn't expect this dog to die too. As he spoke, he couldn't help but laugh maniacally. Qin Yun sect people's countenance changed. Taoist Song stared at him, suddenly sneered and said, What are you laughing at? Although he is not here, but in Qin Yun sect, to deal with a demon clown like you, there are many demons subduing people. Hey! A disdainful voice came from the side. It was that by Du Zi, fiercely said, We can't kill this guy with our own hands. It's really hard to resolve the hatred in our hearts. Sooner or later, we will kill our way up to Qin Yun, grind his bones and scatter his ashes, and let him not rest in peace even in death. Vampire Demon at the back screamed, That's right, it should be like this, or else it will be hard to resolve my 100 years of hatred. The good faction people's countenance changed, seeing these evil faction evildoers were all vicious and cruel. The implication was that they would not even let the dead go. They were very indignant. Tian Linger quietly asked Big Senior Brother Xavion, Big Senior Brother, this Wan. Is Wan teacher uncle? He seems to be extremely powerful. Even these evil faction evildoers are extremely afraid of him. Why have we never heard of him before? Xavion's expression changed. He wanted to speak but stopped, laughed bitterly, and said, Little junior sister, when you have time to return to the mountain, you can ask Master and Shenyang yourself. Tian Linger pursed her lips, snorted, slightly annoyed, said, If you don't want to say, then don't say. I will ask my mother myself. Then she was about to step forward. Sha Danan saw it. His heart was in a hurry. He pulled her, whispered, Shiji, now the enemy is in front of us. Don't go. We will ask later. Tianlinger looked at the front, saw the atmosphere was really tense. She stopped, turned back, and smiled at Shaw Dannon. Shaw Dannon's heart warmed, but suddenly there was a cold snort, full of anger. It was from the evil faction side. Shaw Dannon raised his head and saw behind Master Vim. Bailu slowly appeared, staring at him from far away. For some reason, Shaw Dannon was surprised, unconsciously let go of Tianlinger's hand. Far away, at the bamboo height people, Anan slowly took back her gaze from Shaw Dannon, landed on Bailu, silently looked at her. At this time, the venerable of great strength, who had been frowning in silence, suddenly said, By Duzi, old monster Duanmu, you were lucky enough to escape. You should turn over a new leaf and become a new man. Today you still dare to come out and make trouble. Are you tired of living? Hey! Those people cursed together, vulgar words lingered on. Herald of Hercules' face changed. Suddenly the white-faced scholar stepped forward, smiled, said, This must be Vajra Sek's Herald of Hercules? Herald of Hercules looked at him, said, That's right. Who are you? That pale-faced scholar smiled, did not reply, only said to himself, If Wan Jianyi was standing here and said what you said just now, we, the evil demon clowns in your eyes, would still have some scruples. But if you're Vajra Sek's three-legged cat skills and spells, it's better to hide behind Qin Yun Sek's people. The Falcon people laughed. Even behind them, in the dark forest, there was a faint mocking laughter. Herald of Hercules' face immediately turned red, extremely angry. But Jadian's master Vaskalo, Tian Bui, Suru looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with worry. From the laughter, they knew the Falcon's strong reinforcements had arrived, and the number of people had increased a lot. This battle would most likely be extremely dangerous. Bastard! A loud shout suddenly sounded. It was Onara, who was standing behind Herald of Hercules, leaped up, unwilling to let his master be humiliated. The shattering demon staff glowed with golden light, rushed toward that white-faced scholar. Tian Bui and others were surprised. Herald of Hercules hurriedly shouted, Onara, come back, do not act rashly. But Onara's sudden attack, his speed was extremely fast. In a blink, the shattering demon golden light had already reached before that white-faced scholar, but the white-faced scholar did not panic, only raised his right hand. A faint green light flashed in his palm, facing the shattering demon staff that was rushing over. In the blink of an eye, the baleful destruction golden light was like an arrow that left the bowstring, colliding with the pale-faced scholar's palm with a loud bang. In an instant, everyone's vision blurred, only to see a golden light flickering, the air hissing chaotically, and they actually couldn't see the pale-faced scholar anymore. The good faction young disciples cheered thunderously, but Master Vasp Kalo and Tian Bui and the rest, their faces darkened. After a moment, the golden light gradually dimmed. Everyone was speechless, but that white-faced scholar's expression was calm, only using one hand to block Onara's powerful shattering demon golden light. No matter how Onara urged in the air, it could not advance an inch. He smiled, said, Young man, go back and practice for another 100 years. With that, he waved his right hand. Everyone only saw a flash of green light, and sure, two flew backwards as if he had suffered a heavy blow. The demon vanquishing staff, on the other hand, flew high into the sky with a sharp sound. The venerable of Hercules leaped up and caught the injured stone. Upon closer inspection, he realized that it was just a slight jolt and nothing serious. Only then did he relax. However, his anger only increased. He turned around and was about to make a move. But suddenly a hand stretched out from the side and pulled him. It was Taoist Song Song. His face was like frost, coldly said, Who exactly are you? This missing 1,000 years Qian Kuan Qin Guang Jade ring, why is it in your hands? Herald of Hercules, startled, said, What? Universe Jade ring of clear light. Everyone present, including the Falcon, 8 out of 10 people were shocked. Shaw Dannon was curious, quietly asked Xavion, Does she Xiang? Is this Esper very powerful? Xavion's face had not recovered yet. Nodded quietly, said, I have heard from Master that this ring is a very powerful Esper, a ninth heaven's divine item. But it has been missing for 1,000 years. Did not expect it to reappear in the world today. Shah Danon gasped, only to hear that white-faced scholar smiled at Master Vaskalo. I am a nameless junior, now under the command of Master Vim, a pawn. Master Vim smiled and shook his head, said, Brother Long, you are too modest. Baiduzi, Elder Duanmu, and Vampire Devil, who had also walked over, looked at the white-faced scholar called Brother Long by Master Vim at the same time, but saw his right hand was hidden in his sleeve. The item in his hand could not be seen clearly, but hearing Master Vaskalo was so sure, and this white-faced scholar did not deny it. Most likely he really has this divine ring. Thinking of the legendary power of this divine ring, and the cultivators of Tao, of refinement, all value Esper, their whole body was really hot. Although the three of them appeared at the same time as this white-faced scholar, they did not come from the same place, and had never seen this person before, only knew that not long after they arrived, a highly skilled master mysteriously appeared next to Master Vim. Chapter 130. Immediately, Baiduzi stared fiercely at his right hand again, turned his head, and spoke to Ghost King. Ghost King's sect leader, we have never seen this brother before. When did such an expert appear in Ghost King's sect? Ghost King smiled and said, Brother Baiduzi, our Ghost King sect is a small sect of the Holy Sect. Naturally, we cannot be compared to your Wandu clan. Baiduzi snorted. He belonged to one of the 4 big evil sect branches. Wandu clan. This time he was entrusted by the sect leader to come to this desolate place. Speaking of which, this was the first time he came out of the mountain in 100 years. But although he did not come out, he was still very clear about the evil sect's matters. Today the evil sect was led by the 4 big sects. Wandu clan, Hehuan sect, and Changshinhal were all big sects that rose after the death of Old Man Blackheart 800 years ago. When Bloodforger Hall was in decline, they had a long history and were deeply rooted. Only this Ghost King sect branch suddenly rose 300 years ago. The experts in the sect like bamboo shoots after the rain. In 200 years, they had already divided the evil sect world with the other 3 sects. It was amazing. In the evil sect, power encroachments were everywhere. All the big sects wanted to reach the stage when Old Man Blackheart was still alive. Bloodforger Hall was able to call the wind and summon the rain, just that each sect's power was equal. Even the remaining evil sect's small sects mostly attached themselves to the 4 big sects. It was hard to tell which was better. Therefore, although they were secretly scheming against each other, but on the surface they still managed to maintain harmony. Before Baiduzi came here, Wandu clan leader personally instructed him to find an opportunity to spy on Ghost King sect, to find out what secrets it actually had. How was its strength? These few years in the evil sect, there was a rumor circulating secretly that the legendary evil sect supreme, Holy Scripture, Tian Shu, had already fallen into the hands of Ghost King sect. And right now, Tian Shu was still nowhere to be seen. But this missing Qian Koan clear light jade ring suddenly appeared. Baiduzi was shocked, only felt that Ghost King's sect strength was really unfathomable. But his face revealed a trace of smile. But it looked uglier than crying. Sect leader must be joking. Now who doesn't know that Ghost King sect is like the sun in the sky? But this Brother Long we really have not seen before. We would really like to get to know him. Ghost King looked deeply at Baiduzi. His eyes flashed, suddenly laughed, and said, What Taoist brother said is right. Anyway, we will meet again in the future. You should know that 300 years ago, under the previous generation Ghost King, there were 4 great holy envoys in our Ghost King sect. Baiduzi's expression changed, but ancestor Duanmu cried out involuntarily, What? Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Tortoise. These 4 people are still alive. The pale-faced scholar and Ghost King smiled and looked at each other, then smiled at the crowd and said, Hello, everyone. I am Qing Long on the side of the good faction. The reaction was not that intense, but Baiduzi and the rest of the evil faction people were shaken. 300 years ago, when the Ghost King sect had just risen, other than the previous generation Ghost King, it was these so-called 4 great holy envoys who were the foundation of their strength. From then on, Their power grew day by day, and after several secret fights in the evil faction, they experienced countless bloody storms and finally had today's situation. These four people's strength could be imagined. Qing Long suddenly sighed, turned, and said to Ghost King, "I am still old after all. Look at those good faction youths opposite. Each and every one of them have a puzzled look. Most likely they have never heard of my name." Ghost King smiled and said, "Dragon Brother, don't have to worry too much. The younger generation, don't be surprised because they have not seen much. As long as there is time, Dragon Brother's name will definitely shake the world again." Qing Long laughed loudly. In the midst of his laughter, he looked at his right hand, as if there was still some indistinct desolation. Upon a loud sound, everyone jumped in fright, looked towards the source of the sound. It was Sure Tu's evil breaking staff, shot up to the sky, and only fell down now. The scene quietened down for a moment on the good faction side. Most of them frowned, focused, and on guard. This time the evil faction's revival, the strength of their strength, had already exceeded their expectations, and looking at the situation, there were even more deeper forces hidden yet to appear. And on the evil faction side, each of them had their own ulterior motives. Ancestor Duanmu was still better. He did not belong to any sect, only because he was on good terms with Blood-Sucking Demon, so he stood on his side. But Bai Duzi and Blood-Sucking Demon were both important figures in Wandu clan. Right now, they looked at each other speechlessly, already deeply on guard against this Ghost King sect. Only Ghost King and Qing Long stood there, their expressions calm. Qing Long seemed to whisper something. Ghost King smiled and shook his head, but as if inadvertently, glanced at Zhang Xiaofan. The night gradually deepened. The sea breeze whistled. In the vast sea far away, that inexplicable long whistle in the middle of the night seemed to be getting closer and closer, gradually clearer. Tian Bui and Taoist Vasp Kalo looked at each other. Both saw the intention to retreat in each other's eyes. Suru coughed, softly said to Taoist Vasp Kalo, "Vasp Kalo, senior brother, now that the evildoers are strong, why don't we temporarily retreat, return to the mountain, and discuss with head senior brother before making a decision? What do you think?" Vasp Kalo pondered for a while, decisively nodded, and said, "Junior's sister is right." While speaking, he glanced at Tian Bui. Tian Bui slowly nodded. Taoist Vasp Kalo was about to speak, suddenly thought of something, looked left and right, frowned, quietly said, "Where is Xiao Yikai? Why haven't I seen him for the whole night?" Kiheo, who was standing beside him, heard it, stepped forward and said, "Teacher, when we came out just now, Xiao's senior brother said he was not feeling well, so he did not follow." Taoist Vasp Kalo's face darkened, snorted, but in the end he could not say anything in front of his disciples, could only turn his head, and was about to speak to the other sects like Fa Xiong, Li Sun, etc. Suddenly, behind them, a miserable cry was heard. The crowd stirred, a wave of chaos. A few good faction young disciples standing at the back, heavily injured, staggered out from the darkness, their bodies covered in blood, shouting loudly, "There are evil faction people behind." In the darkness, in the ancient forest, there seemed to be innumerable mournful laughter resounding. Tian Bui and the rest's countenance changed greatly. Ever since Ghost King and the rest appeared, everyone's attention was attracted by those old monsters. Unexpectedly, the evil faction people were full of tricks, secretly sent people to outflank their retreat, and suddenly launched an attack. Just at this moment, light flashed in the forest. Innumerable magical weapons flew out to kill. The good faction people all controlled their magical weapons to counterattack. But firstly, it was unexpected. Secondly, the number of evil faction disciples was far more than what they had imagined. Immediately, they were at a disadvantage. Taoist Vasp Kalo's face was gloomy. With a loud shout, he soared into the air. Unexpectedly, before he could do anything, Bai Duzi and Duanmu Elder pounced on him together. Bai Duzi's mouth gave a long laugh, his expression ferocious. He shouted, "Dog Taoist, give me your life." Taoist Vasp Kalo paused in midair, did not dare to belittle these old monsters, and could only turn around to fight. At the same time, a red light lit up below him. It was Tian Bui who made a move and caught Duanmu Elder. Serene stood on the ground, her eyebrows tightly frowned, Her beautiful face showed a bit of worry. At the good faction side, it was obviously unfavorable. The Falcon still had two unfathomable Vim King and Azure Dragon who had not attacked, and no one knew how many Falcon followers were hiding in the dark. The situation was worrying. Right now, the situation was a mess. As if in the shadows of the night, there were evil faction people everywhere. At any time and anywhere there would be murderous magical weapons flying out. The good faction people fell into a bitter battle. Muffled groans and screams were heard incessantly. Shah Danon held the fire stick, but did not attack because Bamboo Peaks, Xavion, Hede, and others were concerned about his injury. So they surrounded him in the middle. So he was not injured, but the situation was critical. He was also nervous. The Falcon light around him was getting brighter and brighter. The good faction people were gradually suppressed, mainly because in the dark they could not see the Falcon followers hiding in the dark. It was really a big disadvantage. Shah Danon stood at the same place, saw his Shixians and Hede were getting more and more pressured. His heart was anxious, but he felt his body was a bit tired. But it was not a big problem, so he wanted to join the battle. Just at this moment, a soft whistle, like the cry of a phoenix, resounded in the air, clear and pleasant to the ear. A dazzling blue light suddenly soared up. Lu Sweki rose with the sword. The Tianya celestial sword glowed brightly, illuminating the surroundings. The darkness could not get close to her face. She threw herself into the darkness. Whoosh! The sharp whistle shook the sky. This beautiful woman turned into a lightning-like blue light, shot into the darkness of the ancient forest. After a moment, the blue light flashed. The screams in the darkness were endless. The pressure of the people was immediately lightened. At the same time, the chanting of Buddha, the Dharma put its palms together, the pearl of reincarnation, glowing with solemn golden light above its fingertip, slowly turned. Suddenly the eyes opened. The pearl of reincarnation also charged into the darkness on the other side. After a moment, a bright golden light brightened in the darkness, as bright as daytime. Countless of Falcon people screamed and flew out. The situation immediately changed, like Kaheo, Bei, Li Sun, Yanhong, even including Fashion, Stone, etc. They were all outstanding figures among the good faction's younger generation. Just now, they were caught unprepared. Now they immediately made their moves. The evil faction people who were ambushing them did not seem to have any skilled fighters. Very few could block their sharp edge. The situation turned for the better for the good faction. Ghost King and Qing Long, who were standing at a distance, saw this, frowned. Qing Long shook his head slightly, sighed, and said, "These young disciples in the good faction, their aptitude is 1 in a million. Compared to us juniors, they are much stronger." Vim King nodded, looked far away, suddenly said, "The girl who attacked first, did you see the esper in her hand?" Qing Long faintly said, "Is it Tianya?" Vim King turned and looked at him. Qing Long smiled, slowly, as if muttering softly, "Tianya, celestial sword. Tianya, celestial sword." Vim King clasped his hands behind his back, slowly said, "And that monk from Tianyin Temple has the pearl of reincarnation in his hand. That young man in white from Qingyin sect, the celestial sword in his hand is dark green like water. It should be the Dragon Slayer sword." The good faction these few years really painstakingly groomed the young. Chapter 131. In the middle of the night, the forest had already been illuminated as if it was daytime by the light emitted by countless magical weapons. From the depths of the forest to the most intense open space, there seemed to be piercingly cold and fierce light flying everywhere. Under the colorful and beautiful light, bright red blood constantly soared, spraying on the slightly trembling trees. The blood condensed into beads of blood fell silently. Lu Sweki, with a clear whistle, landed on the ground. The next moment in the night, the azure blue like sky, clear like water halo, shot out from her Tanya, celestial sword, like a beautiful woman's gentle eyes, swept past this mortal world. Countless of lush branches and leaves flipped outwards, making a rustling sound. The Falcon disciples dressed in black screamed. Although there were people who tried their best to block, they were also beaten away. Since escaping from Forsaken Abyss, her cultivation seemed to have improved a lot. Shah Danon watched from afar, took a breath of cold air, surprised and impressed, but then his attention returned to his surroundings, saw Xavion, Amandla, and others were gradually struggling. The Falcon disciples surrounding Bamboo Peak were not many in number, but their cultivation was higher than the others around them. Also, looking at their clothing, there was a skull symbol on their clothes, not sure if it was the symbol of Vim. Hede stood in front of Shah Danon. Her face was slightly pale, and there were beads of sweat on her forehead. But she did not panic at all as she controlled Phoenix Soul. Among the Bamboo Peak disciples, Hede was the youngest except for Shah Danon, but her talent was far better than her Shixiang's. In terms of cultivation, besides Xavion, she was the best. But the surrounding Falcon followers did not know if it was because she was a female or some other reason. The main direction of attack was always directed at her. At this moment, even Shah Danon felt Hede was a little strained. The night wind blew through the forest that had turned into a battlefield. In the darkness, there seemed to be countless eyes watching. The shouts were getting more and more urgent. Shah Danon frowned and looked outside. The situation had changed again. The Falcon had already reacted. Anan, Fazan, Kevern, and others who were unstoppable just now were now fighting against strong cultivators. Although they were not at a disadvantage, they could not get away. And the weaker righteous disciples were surrounded by more and more Falcon disciples. Screams were ringing in their ears. The situation was turning to the Falcon side again. Shah Danon gritted his teeth and took out the fire stick. He did not want to rest like this anymore. At least he wanted to help his Shixiangs and Ling Ershiji. But just when he moved, he heard Hede exclaimed. His body stopped as if he was tripped by something. After a moment, another 3 or 4 Esper lights came at him. Xavion and others were surprised, but it was too late to help. Shah Danon rushed forward without thinking, but he was one step too late. At this critical juncture, Tian Linger's pretty face turned pale, almost like a sheet of white paper. Both her hands waved continuously. The amber vermilion silk schwa 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 danced in front of her to block. But it was also too late. In a blink of an eye, 2 streaks of fast, 1 white and 1 black magical weapons dashed in front of her. Shah Danon's heart almost jumped out. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. At this moment, a white shadow flashed. A figure stood in front of Hede. She waved her hands and hit the 2 Espers back. From far away in the darkness, there were several angry shouts and screams. Everyone was relieved. Looked at that person, it was Shinyang Surin. Surin quickly turned back, looked at Hede, said, "Ling Er, are you okay?" Hede was still in shock, nodded. "I am fine, mother." Surin frowned. At this time, the Falcon disciples closed in again. Surin hurriedly said, "All of you leave quickly. You cannot stay here for long. After we get out, all of you leave this island. We will meet in East Sea Changhe." Song Darren, Tian Linger, and the rest were shocked, but saw Suru's stern expression and did not dare to say more. Tian Linger acknowledged, and the Big Bamboo Valley people walked towards the back. At this moment, the scene was a mess. The battle was unusually fierce. Surin dodged left and right, and when she saw a good faction disciple in danger, she went to help and ordered them to retreat. Her cultivation was quite high, far better than the ordinary Falcon disciples. In the night, her figure was floating, graceful and graceful, without any sign of urgency. When there was a gap, she raised her head and looked up, only to see the dark clouds in the sky, but there were lights flashing chaotically. In the midair, it was Taoist Song Song and Tian Bui fighting with evil factions by Du Zi and Elder Duanmu. She was worried in her heart, but seeing that Tian Belize had just fought with blood-sucking demon, and now facing Elder Duanmu, he was still not at a disadvantage. Her heart was slightly comforted. At this time, after being rescued by Surin a few attacks, many of the good faction disciples had already left. Those who remained were mostly Lu Sweki and the others with higher cultivation. The number of people was much lesser. But on the Falcon side, many seemed to be pursuing, so although the good faction was still at a disadvantage, but for the time being, there was not much danger. However, Surin's heart was getting more and more anxious because in front, from the beginning to the end, the Falcon's most mysterious ghost king and that Qing Long had been standing there, smiling and watching the show. On the Falcon's side, Ghost King and Qing Long stood side by side, watching the good faction disciples constantly escaping. Qing Long lightly said, "Are you prepared to let these people go?" Ghost King smiled and said, "These young disciples are insignificant, and besides, this time we came to Lubo Hill is not to fight to the death with these good faction people." Qing Long nodded, raised his head to look at the sky, said, "These two people are among the 5 people that Qing Yun's sect chased into Wildlands." Ghost King said, "That's right, Taoist Vaskalo, Tian Belize, and also Shang Zhengliang, Zhang Shuchang, plus Wan Jian Yi, these are the 5 of them." Qing Long lightly sighed, said, 100 years of time passed in a hurry. Those people were just youngsters who were determined to charge and kill. Now they're actually able to take charge. Ghost King smiled and said, "Brother Long, at that time you were not there due to some matters. If not with you 4 holy envoys in the battle at Qingyun Hill, although our holy sect may not be able to turn the tables, but at least we would not have lost so badly." Qing Long shook his head and said, "Impossible 100 years ago was the peak of the good faction's 3 big sects. Those old bastards came out one after another. Even with us, we would not be able to hold them off. But, it's funny that after thousands of years of our holy sect, we were killed by those 5 people at the holy temple in Wildlands. We were frightened at the mere sight of them." Ghost King was silent for a moment, slowly said, "Yes, at that time, because I had to take care of the previous generation Ghost King. I was not at the Holy Temple, but I also heard that the situation was extremely ugly. A pity that the experts in the Holy Temple were all sent out for the battle at Qingyun Hill. There were countless casualties, if not." Qing Long suddenly interrupted, "At that time, I was at the Holy Temple." Ghost King's body shook. He was taken aback and said, "What, Brother Long? You were at the Holy Temple at that time?" Qing Long gave a wry laugh and said, "That's right. Actually, not only that, other than that lazy black tortoise, white tiger, and vermilion bird were also at the Holy Temple." Ghost King's expression changed, forced a laugh, and said, "Then why did Brother Long not recognize those 2 people just now?" Qing Long gave another wry laugh and said, "Speaking of it, it is also a shameful matter. At that time, not only these 5 people charged all the way into the Wildlands, they actually charged all the way to the Holy Temple. At that time, the entire Wildlands was shaken, extremely shocked. Although White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and I have always been at odds with Chang Shenhal and Wan Du clan who are guarding the Holy Temple. But after all, the Holy Temple was the most important matter, so along with the other experts from the other branches, guarded it together." Ghost King gazed into the air and said, "How come the skills of these 5 people, 100 years ago, were already so high?" Qing Long shook his head and said, "Actually, not really. After the incident, I carefully thought about it. Actually, it was because after we were defeated at Qingyun Hill, too many of our experts died and were in a state of panic. When these 5 people recklessly charged and killed, for a moment we thought that a large number of good faction troops had already arrived. We were already afraid before the battle even started. We did not expect that there were only 5 of them." Speaking till here, he paused for a while and continued, "Among these 5 people, actually I've only met Wan Jianyi before, so I do not recognize the other 4. That year when they charged into the Holy Temple, the 5 of them actually split into 5 paths, charged in from different directions. We were caught off guard. We were also anxious and fearful. Once we heard battle cries from all directions, we were already in a mess. Originally, if we had calmly fought and waited for the situation to settle down, we would definitely have won. A pity that there was actually a Wan Jianyi among them." Ghost King frowned and said, "What about this person?" Qing Long closed his eyes slightly, was silent for a moment, heaved a long sigh, shook his head and said, "This person is a heaven-warping genius with astonishing talent. He is the only one I have seen in my life. After the incident we discussed privately, we all felt that although the other 4 people's skills were not low, but compared to Wan Jianyi, they were still lacking a lot. It can be said that if not for this person, these few Qing Yun sect fellows definitely would not have been able to charge into our wildlands, not to mention killing their way into our holy temple." looking at his expression, as if immersed in his memories, indistinctly yearning. At that time, the other 4 people charged in from the side and back. We instead gathered our main forces at the main entrance of the Holy Temple. While we were hesitating and shocked at that moment, Wan Jianyi alone, wielding his sword, and charged in. Ghost King frowned and said, "Just him alone." Qing Long sighed and said, "That's right, just him alone." I still remember that his clothes were as white as snow, his sword jade like water. Ah, that's right, it is that Dragon Slayer sword. Not seeing it for 100 years, I almost could not recognize it. Ghost King was taken aback, saw Qing Long's left hand pointing forward. It was actually pointing at the Dragon Slayer sword in the hands of Lin Jingyu, who was still fighting in the middle of the field. Chapter 132. So this Dragon Slayer sword was originally in Wan Jianyi's hands? Qing Long nodded and said, "That's right, it was in his hands." At that time, I shouted loudly, but he did not say a word, only laughed incessantly and charged into our group, killing unhindered. His momentum was unstoppable. TSK, aye, what a hero. Ghost King nodded. His face was also filled with awe, said, "This person is indeed powerful, extremely daring." What happened next? Qing Long said, "We were all shocked and angry, but we were also afraid that other than him, there were other good faction experts who were about to attack, and the battle cries behind the Holy Hall were getting closer and closer. We were even more panicked. In our panic, we actually allowed him to charge to the Holy Mother of Netherlight and Heaven Vidyaraj's main hall." Ghost King's usually calm expression suddenly changed. He lost his voice and said, "What?" Qing Long laughed bitterly and said, "Even you have such a reaction. You can imagine how furious we were at that time." At this moment, they didn't care whether the other experts would come or not. Everyone rushed towards him like madmen, using whatever magic treasures they had. In just a moment, his white robes were dyed red with blood. But he didn't look back and rushed straight into the Holy Temple. He soared up and flew to the 2 statues of the Nether Mother and the Heaven Vidyaraja that were worshipped side by side in the Holy Temple. On the white wall between the 2 statues, he carved the words Wan Jian. Ghost King was instantly speechless. Qing Long suddenly said, "Vermilion Bird had always been wearing a black veil. You know that, right?" Ghost King was slightly surprised and said, "That's right, why?" Qing Long said, "She was the only female among the 4 of us, but her heart of serving the 2 saints was the most devout. At that time, I only saw her disregarding everything and was the first to charge up, taking advantage of the blink of an eye. When Wan Jianyi was carving the words, she slashed down and actually chopped off Wan Jianyi's left hand." Ghost King was shocked again. Qing Long sighed and said, "You were also shocked, right? At that time we were all shocked too, because when Wan Jianyi charged in, his power was too great. We did not expect him to face so many of us alone. No matter how powerful he was already an arrow at the end of its flight. Unexpectedly, although his left hand was severed and blood was spurting out like a fountain, other than his pale complexion, his expression did not change. Instead, he turned around and moved closer to the Vermilion Bird. Stretching out his hand, he lifted her veil to take a look, and then he laughed and said, "You really are a peerless beauty." After speaking, he controlled the Dragon Slayer sword and actually charged out again. Ghost King shook his head and said, "He can actually kill his way out like this." Qing Long sighed and said, "Firstly, he was too strong. Although his arm was broken and blood splattered all over the Holy Temple, the power of his sword seemed to be even stronger than before. Secondly, the other 4 Qing Yun sect fellows actually started a fire behind the Holy Temple. Thick smoke spread everywhere. We were worried that there were more good faction people and panicked. We were anxious to put out the fire, and he actually rushed out." Ghost King heaved a long sigh and said, "Never thought that in the good faction there would actually be such a hero." Qing Long indifferently said, "Unfortunately, although the hero is amazing and insufferably arrogant, but he did not have a good ending. That day when we found out that there were actually only 5 Qing Yun sect people who charged in, we were really fuming with anger. But I could also see that those fellows from Wan Du clan and Changshan Hall, although they scolded ferociously, but in their hearts, they were extremely impressed with Wan Jian, especially my junior sister Vermilion Bursai. He seemed to have thought of something and did not continue. He changed the topic and said, "At that time, we all thought that in Qingyun's sect, it would definitely be this person who would take over the position of sect leader." Unexpectedly, not long after, we heard that it was his senior brother Daoxian who took over the position. And from then on, there was no news of this outstanding person ever again. Until today, I then found out that he is actually dead. As he said this, he sighed with regret. Ghost King smiled and said, "That's right, a pity that I could not have showdown with such a hero. It is really a lifetime regret." Qing Long raised his head and glanced at the sky, suddenly sneered and said, "Duanmu, and by doozy these few fellows, that year they returned from Qingyun Hill in defeat and escaped into the wildlands. In the end, before they could reach Holy Temple, they met Wan Jian, Yi, and the other 5, and were beaten till they fled and did not even dare to return to Holy Temple. Just now, they actually dared to loudly ask if Wan Jian had arrived. Really shameless." Ghost King smiled and said, "They are only that old monster's lackeys from Wan Du clan. Brother Long need not be angry." Qing Long stretched out his hand and gently brushed his white clothes, indifferently said, "That year when Wan Jian barged into Holy Temple, it was our holy sect's greatest shame and humiliation. I trained hard for 100 years and took the risk to find the ring of universe clear light, also that one day I can have another showdown with him. Today I heard that he had passed away. I only felt disappointment and regret in my heart. But I did not expect that these people would actually say such shameless words like digging up his grave and digging up his corpse. I am really ashamed to be associated with them." Ghost King shook his head and smiled, raised his head to watch the battle. The light in the sky was getting brighter and brighter. The 4 figures were almost out of sight, and the dark clouds in the sky, right now, were almost all illuminated by the light from their magical weapons. The firmament was speechless. Only the waves of long cries in the distant sea gradually turned mournful. Ghost King suddenly frowned, turned his head, and said to Qing Long, "Don't you feel that tonight's night is a little strange?" Qing Long looked up and was silent for a moment. Suddenly his countenance changed and said, "You mean?" Ghost King nodded his head and said, "It is said that every time that strange beast comes into being, heaven and earth will definitely change color, accompanied by great wind and rain. Therefore, in the ancient scrolls, strange tales of deities and demons, it is recorded that this beast is the thunder god's mount." Qing Long's face gradually turned solemn, frowned, and said, "How could it be so uncoincidental tonight?" Ghost King pondered for a moment and said, "I have been at this Lubo Hill for quite some time, but in the past nights, there has never been such strange cries like tonight. I'm afraid it is really Kuei Nyo that is going to come into being tonight. Seems like we also have to make early preparations." Qing Long slowly nodded his head and said, "That's right. After all, Kuei Nyo is a big matter. Let's leave this to Wan Du clan people. As long as we can subdue Kuei Nyo with the other 3 spiritual beasts, our—" Ghost King suddenly coughed. Qing Long was stunned, and then laughed in spite of himself, and shook his head, said, "These 100 years of hard training, it has turned me silly. Sect head, please don't blame me." Ghost King smiled, turned and walked away, no longer turning back to look at the people who were still fighting intensely. Qing Long glanced afar and saw the good faction disciples were leaving one after another, gradually disappearing into the forest and disappearing. He couldn't help but faintly felt touched, sighed, and turned to follow Ghost King. The night was silent, but in the darkness there seemed to be countless pairs of ferocious eyes staring at them. While they were running, a cry came from somewhere far away, echoing in the depths of the forest, accompanied by the unknown, mysterious cry from the distant sea. This night seemed especially mournful. Sha Danan, Hidi, Xavion, Hidaji, Amandla, a total of 5 people, rode on their esper and flew forward rapidly in the forest. Originally, with their cultivation, riding on their esper and flying straight to the sky would naturally be much faster, but just when they broke through the falcon's tight encirclement, when they were about to fly up, they saw a few small factions' disciples flying up. Suddenly a few fierce lights came out from the forest and hit them down. Waves of miserable cries. It seemed like they were not going to survive. Everyone was pale. The forest was lush with leaves. And it was late at night. There were so many falcon people around. If they flew up and were discovered, it was like becoming a live target. Xavion, as the Dashisiao. After all he had seen more of the world than his shitty and shimmy, he made a prompt decision and decided to fly quickly in the forest. Although the forest was dark, it was difficult to find the falcon followers, but it was also difficult for them to see themselves. As long as they fly straight to the east, once out of the forest, out of the falcon's encirclement, it would be much safer. Once decided, the 5 people flew with all their strength toward the east. Xavion took the lead. Shaw Danon followed at the back, riding on their Esper and flying through the forest. Right now, although there was still some faint pain in his chest, but the injuries he had sustained during the fight with blood-sucking demon were not as serious as he had imagined. And from the inferno mirror tied to his right arm, threads of warm yuanyang qi were transmitted from time to time, slowly circulating in his body, as if it had a special restraining effect on blood-sucking demon's strange blood-sucking skill. However, although the inferno mirror secretly restrained the evil power of art of blood-sucking, when Shaw Danon was flying with the fire stick, the strange cold feeling from the fire stick was somewhat in conflict with the inferno mirror. In his body, when the two strange energies touched, there was a repulsion. However, the inferno mirror was not driven by Shaw Danon's spiritual power, so it was quickly suppressed by the cold energy from the fire stick. Shaw Danon's spirit was focused on flying with his Shi Xiang and Shiji. Naturally, he did not notice the small changes in his body. He only raised his head inadvertently during the gap of flight and saw the dark clouds at the edge of the sky were rolling like boiling water. Bursts of light shone straight to the sky, reflected half of the sky red. That was where his master Tion Belize and Sherbwa Master Vaskalo were fighting with the Falcon heretics. Will he be all right? Thinking of this, Shaw Danon shook his head, thought his master's cultivation is so high, of course he will be fine. It was just him thinking too much. After laughing at himself for thinking too much, Shaw Danon pulled himself together and was about to speed up to catch up with his Shi Xiang and Shiji. In front of them, the darkness was like an endless net, long and endless. The 5 of them were getting further away from the noise of the fight, into the darkness. Even the surroundings were getting quiet. In the darkness, it was like there was only the darkness in front of them, on the sea surface that was getting closer and closer to them. The shrill scream was getting clearer and closer. Chapter 133. The 5 of them were all from Jadian sect. Right now, they were flying rapidly on their magical weapons. Their speed was extremely fast. After a while, under the dim light of their magical weapons, they could already faintly see the edge of the forest in front of them. And further away was the sea hidden in the darkness of the night. The sea breeze blew, accompanied by waves of long whistles, reverberating in this deep night. Everyone's heart was filled with joy, and their spirits were roused. Just as they were about to increase their speed and fly out of the dark forest, suddenly, at this moment, a dark red light silently shot out from the darkness and hit Hidaji, who was flying in the middle with incomparable speed. Hidaji groaned, his body swayed, and actually fell from midair. Xavion and the rest were shocked, but in a blink of an eye they had already flown far ahead, quickly turned and flew back, and Shaw Danon and Tion Linger, who were following behind, also hurriedly flew back to Hidaji. Amanla stood closest to Hidaji. His reaction was also the fastest. Immediately, abruptly, stopped his body, landed next to Hidaji. His eyes swept around, his mouth at the same time anxiously asked, "Fourth senior brother, are you all right?" In a moment, Hidaji's forehead was already covered with cold sweat. His hoarse voice said, "Be careful. This person's evil magic is very fierce." Before he could finish his sentence, he saw another dark red light shoot out from the darkness. Amanla frowned tightly. With a sideways movement, he blocked in front of Hidaji. Both of his hands held the incantation. Those 3 strange dice immediately flew out, met that red light. In the darkness, someone exclaimed, "E," with a rather strange meaning, but seemed to be surprised by this Esper's shape. Regardless of a manless level of cultivation, that red light did not have any hesitation, directly rushed over. In that instant, the two objects collided. Baishu's body shook. He only felt that when that red light collided with his dice magical weapon, a thick, evil aura actually transmitted to his own magical weapon. At the same time, using the magical weapon as coal, indistinctly had the tendency to attack him. Amanda was surprised. He had never seen this kind of evil magic before. While he was wondering what to do, Xavion, Hede, and others had arrived. Sha Danon followed behind them. He frowned. He felt the red light was familiar. It seemed to be the red devil eye of the Falcon Bloodforger Yin boss at Forsaken Abyss. As expected, following a few long laughs, a few people walked out from the darkness. It was the Bloodforger Hall people led by Yin leader. Yin boss stood at the very front with a huge red eye on his face. It was very scary, but it had already returned to normal. And behind him, that beautiful woman, Lu Gao, and Wild Dog Taoist were also there, only that young Lin Feng was missing. Sha Danon had met those people many times. He recognized them at first glance, especially Cynical Dialectian. It was that person who brought Vampire Devil here tonight and made Sha Danon suffer a lot. But when he looked at him, he saw Cynical's face was full of bruises and bruises. It was most likely because Vampire Devil just threw him away. But he crashed into the thick and lush forest. His face was full of bruises. These people from Bloodforger Hall were now weak, and when the evil faction Big Sex were fighting fiercely with the good faction, they were instead sent to the edge of this forest far away, waiting to see if there were any fish that slipped through the net. It was obvious that the evil faction people looked down on them. Yin leader and the rest only dared to be angry, but did not dare to say anything. They were originally sulking, but unexpectedly, there were really people who ran all the way from the forest to here. It was really a great opportunity to render meritorious service. As long as they captured these people, in the future in the evil sect, Bloodforger Hall's position would naturally rise slightly. Wild Dog Taoist was feeling gloomy tonight. When he looked over, he suddenly discovered that familiar Qing Yin sect lad was also among the five, and right now he was looking at himself, his expression like a smile, but not a smile. Most likely he was mocking him. Cynical's anger was no small matter. Vampire Devil's cultivation was too high. His character was even more cruel. Even if Cynical had 10 guts, he would not dare to seek revenge. But when he saw Sha Danon, he immediately thought if it was not for this brat, he would not suffer like this. Anger rose in his heart. He shouted, summoned the Fong Esper, and hit Sha Danon. The plot on the other side had succeeded. Nian Lauda was feeling arrogant and was about to say something along the lines of, "If you guys are smarter, you won't have to suffer so much." Who would have thought that before the words left his mouth, Wild Dog had already charged over? The words were at the tip of his tongue. He opened his mouth and was about to speak, but he swallowed them back. In a moment of desperation, he couldn't help but choke and cough twice. His heart was filled with rage. Xavion hurriedly flew to Hidaji's side and landed on the ground. He examined Hidaji and discovered that his junior brother was caught off guard and had been invaded by the demonic energy. It seemed that he would not be able to make a move for a while, but fortunately his life was not in danger. While he was worrying, he heard two strange screams behind him. A heretic with a face like a dog rushed to him. Sha Danon used his Esper to catch him. They were fighting each other. From afar, Yin leader angrily glared at Wild Dog, but then frowned. He recognized that the one fighting with Wild Dog was that Qing Yun sect lad with the strange fire stick-like magical weapon. That day in Forsaken Abyss, his red devil, I actually could not do anything to this person, and even almost suffered a loss in his hands, so he had a deep impression. Cynical Dialectian and Sha Danon had already fought for a while. Their figures flashed in the forest, almost turned into two beams of light. But Cynical Dialectian was getting more and more surprised. After several months, Sha Danon's cultivation had improved a lot compared to that day at Forsaken Abyss, especially the strange fire stick in his hand. It looked ugly, but green light flashed in front of him. Every time his Esper fangs charged, but once it met the fire stick, it was immediately defeated. And as time went by, the green-black pearl-like place at the front of the fire stick gradually emitted a faint evil energy, sucking toward him. Cynical Dialection's heart was chilled. He could not help but think of that unlucky Jiang Lao San, who died after his blood was sucked dry by this kid. He thought to himself why the current good faction bastards, the Esper in their hands was 10 times more evil than your grandfather cynical. Nian leader frowned tightly. He expected that there would be a lot of people from the Holy Sect tonight. He was afraid that not long later there would be people coming, and if they saw that the Bloodforger Hall could not even deal with a few Qingyan juniors, he was afraid that he would not have the face to see anyone again. He turned his head and signaled to the beautiful woman and Lu Gao. Both of them understood. Their bodies moved and immediately ran towards the center. But almost at the same time, Xavion and Tian Linger also came over. Actually, tonight's situation was really disadvantageous to the good faction. Originally, everyone thought that the people who gathered at this desolate place were only a small group of evil faction members. Unexpectedly, not only there were so many people, even some old devils who lived in seclusion for hundreds of years also came out. Xavion was anxious. Seeing that he was entangled by the evil faction members again, he wanted to use all his strength to get rid of these evildoers. Unexpectedly, once he made his move, a dark red light shot over. Xavion hurriedly used his celestial sword to receive it. His heart suddenly sank. The evil energy from Red Devil I passed through the 10 Tigers' celestial sword and attacked. Xavion's cultivation was profound, and naturally he could withstand it. But at the same time, he felt that this evil person's cultivation was really not low. Most likely, it was even stronger than himself. At this time, Tian Linger was already fighting with a beautiful woman. Amandla watched from his side for a while. He could already see that the big-eyed evil person's evil magic was very powerful. De Shixiang was a little strained. He rushed up and joined Xavion, 2 against 1. Nian leader stood at the same place. Red Devil I continued to shoot out evil energy, filled red light. Fighting 1 against 2, he actually did not fall into a disadvantageous position. And at a distance, Lu Gao rushed to Cynical's side. Together with Cynical, he fought Sha Danan. But Sha Danan was after all not that Nian leader who had cultivated for many years. Not long after, he immediately felt the pressure. Cynical received strong support. His spirit was lifted. He laughed and said, "Brat, today you will fall into my hands. See how Grandpa Cynical will take care of you." Sha Danan could only feel the pressure in front of him was getting heavier, but he could only clench his teeth and hold on. He hoped that his 2 senior brothers and sister could quickly finish off the other evil people and come over to help. Originally, ever since he comprehended part of the meaning of Tian Shu in the Black Drake Cave, his cultivation had actually unknowingly improved. But firstly, the time he comprehended was too short, and his cultivation was not enough. Secondly, he could not use Buddhism's great Brahmin wisdom in public. Lastly, and most importantly, tonight he was defeated by blood-sucking Evil Wish. Although his injury was not considered serious, but in this intense fight, after a long time, his body gradually began to not listen to his commands. In watching the fight at the side, Tian Linger and that beautiful woman were equally matched. Both of them were flying high and dodging low. Their appearance was also quite beautiful. Their figures were graceful and were quite nice to look at. But if they wanted to come over to help, it would be difficult for them to do so in a short time. And Xavion and Amandla were also tightly entangled by Nian leader. Although they could see Xiao's shitty situation was getting more and more dangerous, but the dark red light kept shooting at them. They could not get away in a hurry. Instead, both of them were almost hit by the red light because they were distracted. Sha Danan was gradually forced back by Cynical and Lu Gao. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. He gasped for breath. Even his footsteps were a little messy. He dodgy lay on the ground. His heart was anxious. He knew that if there was no help, in a short while, this Xiao Shitty would die in the hands of these 2 evil people. The relationship between Bamboo Peak's disciples had always been quite good. Everyone was quite fond of Sha Danan, this honest Xiao Shitty. At this moment, he dodgy, gritted his teeth, and forced himself to stand up. He took out his Esper and was about to help Xiao Shitty. But before he could use his incantation, the evil energy inside his body poured into him. His head became dizzy. Stars flashed before his eyes, and he fell down again. Chapter 134. Shah Danon heard the sound, turned his head in the midst of the fierce battle, immediately surprised, cried, "Fourth Shi Xiao." Unexpectedly at this moment, when he was distracted, cynical Dialectian and Lu Gao's Esper attacked at the same time. Shah Danon could not react fast enough, barely used the fire stick to block in front of him. A loud boom. Cynical and Lu Gao's body shook, but Shah Danon himself was also sent flying, fell heavily on the ground. Cynical Dialectian laughed loudly, flew up together with Lu Gao. The Fong and Lu Gao's Esper attacked from the air, looked like they were about to take Shah Danon's life. Hidi, Xavion, and others exclaimed, but it was too late to help. Seeing Shah Danon was about to die here, Hidaji had already turned his head, could not bear to watch anymore. Suddenly, a blue light flashed in the forest, like a ripple of water. Blue light rippled. In a blink of an eye lit up this place. Hidaji was overjoyed, cried, "Lu!" Before he finished, that figure broke through the air, like an arrow leaving the bow. Anan came riding on her sword, her face as cold as frost, but in her pair of bright eyes reflected the blue light of Aeolian Firmus in front of her, like it was emitting hot flame, burning incessantly. Wild Dog and Lu Gao were shocked. That blue light, which was just a distance away, in a blink of an eye was right in front of them, and looking at it, it seemed to have the unparalleled, imposing manner of splitting the sky and breaking the mountains. Comparing the two, naturally their own lives were more important. Almost at the same time, both of them retracted their magical weapons and blocked the Tianya, celestial sword, together. Boom! The sand and stones flew away, the nearby trees in the forest shook violently. Leaves fell. Wild Dog and Lu Gao flew backwards, landing directly behind Yen Leader. In the sky, full of leaves, Anan's figure gradually appeared, stood next to Shah Danon. Her face was especially pale, probably because of the violent impact. Shah Danon looked at her, saw in this night. Her face was still breathtakingly beautiful, like a proud lily blooming in the depths of the darkness. And in that beautiful coldness, he could faintly see there was a trace of faint gentleness. "Thank you." Shah Danon suppressed the sudden feeling of his heart jumping, said quietly. Anan shook her head, quietly said, "When I was in danger in Forsaken Abyss, you also saved me like this. Why say these words?" Shah Danon, startled, did not know what to say, silently nodded. Anan looked at him, suddenly smiled faintly. That was a smile in the falling leaves. Shah Danon's eyes, it was like in the night. Only in front of him the ice melted. Shah Danon suddenly shook his head, then did not dare to look at Anan again. He grabbed the fire stick and rushed to the Shi Xiang, who was fighting with Nian Boss. Anan stood behind him, watching his back. After a moment of silence, she followed up and caught Cynical and Lu Gao, who were about to stop him. With Lu Swecky's participation, the situation immediately changed. Her skills were already extremely high, and after escaping from Forsaken Abyss, she improved even further and also had the divine weapon Tianya in her hands. Lu Gao and Wild Dog were fighting 2 against 1, and they were still at a disadvantage. And at Nian Boss's place, seeing Shah Danon had joined the battle, his heart jumped. He was not afraid of this kid's cultivation, but he was very afraid of the strange stick in his hand. As expected, when Shah Danon came, he controlled the fire stick to block a few rays of red light. His face did not change at all. The red devil eyes, evil aura that Xavion and others were deeply afraid of did not seem to have any effect on him. This time Xavion and Amanla were free. The celestial sword and dice immediately greeted Nian Boss. Nian Boss shouted angrily, but no matter how much strength he used to activate Red Devil Eye, Shah Danon only had some difficulty in blocking the red light. He was not affected by the evil aura at all. In just a short while, the old man was already struggling to make ends meet. In the midst of the chaos, he looked to the side and saw that Lu Gao, Wild Dog, and even that beautiful lady seemed to be unable to gain any advantage. He could only shout loudly, "Go!" In his shout, Red Devil, I suddenly exploded, shot out 7 or 8 rays of red light. Shah Danon barely blocked 5, but the rest of the red light had already blocked Xavion and Amanla for a while. Nien Boss took advantage of this gap, turned and left, and the Bloodforger people far away, also one after another, went back. Anin snorted, did not care about Xavion, shouted, "Don't chase a cornered enemy." Aeolian Firmus crossed the air, chased after. Shah Danon was surprised, quickly followed. The blue light of Aeolian Firmus was like lightning, caught up in a blink of an eye. Cynical Dialectian, who was running at the back, felt the cold wind behind him. The hair on his back stood up, could not help but shout, "Help!" Nien Boss and others were surprised, quickly turned back. But at this moment, behind the Bloodforger people, deep in the dark forest, suddenly a white light flashed, a white flower floated out. Shah Danon stood at the back, stopped, speechless for a moment. That strange white flower flashed again and again in the air. Where the white light swept past, it seemed to transform into countless white petals, turning into a sky full of flower rain, like a serene sea of flowers, rushing towards Anin's blue light sword. Lusweki's Tanya celestial sword did not retreat at all, charged straight up. In an instant, the two strange treasures clashed together. Time, at that moment, seemed to stop for a minute. Suddenly, an invisible but powerful chi wave rushed out from the two magic treasures. With the two magic treasures as the center, it rushed out in all directions. The fallen leaves were like rain, but they were blown into the sky, and some of the people on the ground actually took a step back. After a long time, the sound of the wind gradually quieted down. Anin floated back to Shah Danon's side. Shah Danon looked at her. Her face seemed paler, like even the blood was gone. Anin seemed to feel Shah Danon's worry, looked at him, slightly shook her head, indicating she was fine. Shah Danon turned his head, looked at the front. In the darkness, that white strange flower slowly turned in midair. After a moment, it slowly fell. There was no sound, but suddenly, a hand as white as snow reached out from the darkness and gently grabbed the strange heartbreak flower. Shah Danon suddenly felt his heart jumped again. Bailu quietly walked out from the darkness. Nien Boss and others' faces were filled with respect, but Bailu did not even look at them. Her pair of eyes only looked deeply at Shah Danon, then moved to Anin's face, carefully examined. Lusweki's gaze did not have the slightest intention of retreating, also staring at the beautiful woman opposite him. No one spoke in the field. The atmosphere suddenly quieted down from the intense battle just now, and there seemed to be some slight awkwardness. Shah Danon looked at Bailu, then at Anin. He felt his mouth was a little dry. But at that moment, the sound of footsteps came. It was Hidi who came to his side. She looked strangely at Anin and Bailu, asked Shah Danon, "Xiaofan, what happened to them?" Shah Danon was surprised, but he himself did not really understand. He just subconsciously felt a little awkward and strange. When Hidi suddenly asked him, he did not know why. But when Hidi asked, Bai Yao and Anin suddenly looked at her at the same time. That pair of calm eyes swept past Hidi's face. Tianlinger was shocked and subconsciously took a step back. But Lusweki was after all from the same sect, so she asked Lusweki, "Lu senior sister, what is it?" Anin silent for a moment, then turned her head, said quietly, "Nothing." At the same time, Bailu also moved her eyes away. Shah Danon startled, then suddenly woke up. He scolded himself for being so strange. Now everyone was in danger, but he was still standing there. Damn it. Immediately he whispered to Tianlinger and Anin beside him, "Let's go quickly. There are too many evil faction people on this island." A cold snort, with a hint of anger, came from Bayao, who was standing in front of them. Shah Danon did not dare to look at her. He turned and retreated. Anin looked at Bailu, then retreated with Hidi. Xavion and others waited until they returned, then helped the injured Hidaji up, said, "Let's hurry." After speaking, he turned and prepared to head towards the direction of the sea, and behind them, Wild Dog was itching to try, but was pulled back by Nien Leader, whispered, "Miss Biao is here. Don't do anything rash." Listen to Mississippi. Bila heard it, but she was still indifferent. She watched the Jadian people were guarding against them, and gradually retreated. And her figure did not move at all. Far away, At the direction of the sea, where Shah Danon and others retreated, there was a long roar. This time, the roar was far from the previous one. It was like a dragon's roar, went straight to the 9 heavens, shook the land. There was also the faint sound of thunder, but that sound seemed to come from the deep of the sea. Bailu stood there, suddenly raised her head. Her face was cold. A drop of water fell on her face. The wind came, it began to rain. Chapter 135. As if it had suddenly come, rain fell from the dark night sky, and from the depths of the distant sea, gusts of fierce wind, like a wild beast breaking out of its cage, roared and blew towards this isolated island in the boundless sea. The wind carried the rain, covered the sky, and covered the earth. In a blink of an eye, those people fell into the wind and rain. Shah Danon followed everyone, stopped, raised his hand to barely block the urgent wind and rain. The soybean-sized raindrops hit his face. It was already a little painful. In front of them, the sea and the wind and rain at this night was like a giant beast that woke up from its deep sleep, began to roar. In front of Shah Danon and others was a long beach, and at the end of the beach was the ferocious sea. In the boundless darkness of the night, waves that were getting higher and higher came crashing down one after another, crashing heavily onto the flat beach. With every crashing, the ground seemed to shake as well. One wave, another wave, like a ferocious giant beast, stepping on the raging waves, slowly came to them. The sky was silent, except for the endless thunder in the dark clouds. Everyone's face changed, the power of heaven and earth, even this. Hede, surprised, asked Xavion, "To Shixiang, what should we do? What is this thing?" Xavion was also surprised. He had never seen such a scene before. He frowned, not knowing what to do. But Shah Danon, who was standing at the back, although surprised because he had seen the ancient monster abyssal viper at the heartless sea under Forsaken Abyss, he was calmer. But when he remembered the power of abyssal viper, it was not something a human could resist. His heart was chilled. Thinking of that, Shah Danon's heart suddenly moved. He subconsciously looked at Anon and saw that beautiful girl was silently standing next to him. The wind and rain had wet her clothes and hair, sticking to her white face. She was staring at the dark sea, lost in thought. Eh! Suddenly, Du Baishu, who was standing in front, shouted, pointed his finger to the front, anxiously said, "All of you look in front. There seems to be someone." Everyone was taken aback, looked ahead, and indeed saw that on the beach several zhongs ahead, several figures suddenly appeared from the darkness, all dressed in black. In the night, if one did not pay attention, it was really difficult to distinguish them. Most likely it was Du Baishu, who had sharp eyes and was actually discovered by him. However, discovery was one thing. At this moment, the sky was full of wind and rain, and the night was dark. No one could clearly see what those people were doing. They could only vaguely see that they were scattered and busy on the beach. Tian Linger frowned tightly, turned her head, and said, "Did you all see clearly? Who are these people?" Du Baishu and Xavion shook their heads at the same time. Lu Sweki, who was behind them, suddenly said, "These people are Falcon people." Tian Linger startled for a moment, then understood. At this moment on Billows Hill, the righteous were all fighting with the Falcon. How could there be dozens of people doing these things on this strange beach? Thinking of this, her heart was even more worried. Couldn't help but looked back, saw those Falcon people who were still fighting. None of them had walked out of the forest. What to do to Shixiang? Everyone's eyes fell on Xavion. Xavion hesitated for a moment, finally decided to temporarily avoid, said, "We are in a disadvantageous situation. Let's leave here first." Then he called everyone and was about to turn to the side and walk far away from this beach. Unexpectedly, when they had only walked a few steps, they heard a long roar like a dragon's roar, rumbled from the deep sea. In a moment, the sound of wind, rain, and thunder in the firmament of heaven and earth roared together. A bolt of lightning tore through the sky, accompanied by the loud sound of thunder above. The huge waves in the sea, which were as tall as small mountains, suddenly split apart as if they were forcefully torn apart. Countless waves splashed. Amidst the strong wind and violent rain, From the depths of the darkness, as if stepping on thunder, a huge figure suddenly leaped out from the depths of the sea. After almost merging with the night, it landed heavily. The entire Billows Hill suddenly seemed to shake together. Shah Danon and others immediately held their breath. It was a very large, strange beast. Its head was even bigger than the noble spirit water Kirin on Mount Jadian Peak of Widows. Its body shape looked like a cow, green body, but there was no horn on its head. But the most unbelievable thing was under the large body of this strange beast, there was only one thick and strong foot, growing in the middle of its stomach. Looking at it, it looked like a common people's one-legged play. Under that ferocious appearance, there was a trace of comical and cute. At that moment, the men in black on the beach immediately quietly retreated into the darkness. But on the beach, every few feet, there was a strange object stuck upside down, glowing with a faint red light, right in front of the strange beast, forming a large circle. In the dark night, even separated by the wind and rain, it was still very eye-catching. At Jadian's side, everyone looked at each other, did not know what the Falcon people were doing. Looking at their appearance, it seemed that they were here to deal with this strange behemoth, but this trap was a bit too obvious. In the darkness of the night, this red circle of light could be seen by anyone. It was just that they didn't know what this strange beast was. Indeed, ever since the strange beast had come out of the dark deep sea, it seemed to have sensed something. It had been standing on the shore of the turbulent waves, not going ashore. It had only extended its huge head into the air and sniffed. Du Baishu suddenly got shocked, cried out involuntarily, "Oh no, this fellow's eyes might not be good." Everyone also reacted. Right now, those red dots on the beach were really very obvious. But that strange beast turned a blind eye to those things in front of it. Could it be that it had been living in the deep sea all these days and did not use its eyes, so it degenerated? Not knowing why, the Jadian people instead started to worry for this strange beast. After a short period of suffocating time, lightning flashed and thunder roared. The wind and rain howled. There was no sign of it subsiding, but that strange beast seemed to not have discovered anything. It shook its head and did not seem to use much strength. Suddenly, there was another clap of thunder in the sky. The huge body actually leapt up into the air, leaping forward. That incomparably thick and strong leg stepped onto Lubo Hill Beach. In that stretch of red dots, it left a deep footprint. In the night, in the darkness, almost at the same time, a mysterious, chanting incantation sounded. That voice was like a groan from the netherworld, deep and distant, drifting in the wind and rain in the night sky. At the same time, following that mysterious incantation, the dots, which were emitting faint red light, suddenly lit up at the same time, and those black-attired men who had just disappeared at the same time also returned to the side of the mysterious object that was stuck upside down on the ground. This strange beast suddenly raised its head. After a moment, it made a loud roar. Ayo, eh. The loud sound almost turned into a tangible sound wave, countless of wind and rain. Under this roar, which was like falling into the mortal world, flew out horizontally, shooting out. But at this moment, all of the black-attired men placed their hands on that mysterious object on the beach. In an instant, those objects on the ground immediately glowed brightly, the red lights sparkling and translucent. The red lights, which were separated by several zhongs, suddenly shot out horizontally, in a moment joined together into one, forming an enormous red halo. Without waiting for everyone to react, that red halo once again abruptly soared up. Innumerable dazzling red lights shot up at the same time, forming a spectacular red light wall, trapping that strange beast in the light wall, at the same time shooting straight up to the sky, finally converging into one point in the sky. As if the veil of the night had been lifted, the darkness also quietly retreated. In the mid-air, a figure slowly appeared. Ghost King proudly stood on a red ancient cauldron floating in the sky. His expression solemn, both of his hands crossed in front of his chest holding the incantation gesture, softly chanting that mysterious incantation. And all of the red lights were unceasingly converging into that ancient cauldron floating below his feet. Ayo, ayo! Another furious roar rang out. The strange beast that was surrounded by the red halo leaped up angrily and crashed straight into the wall of light. Ghost King's expression tightened in the midair. The sound of his incantation immediately sped up. And the Qing Yun's sect people in the distance, right now, were also dumbstruck, forgetting that this was actually a great opportunity for them to escape, not even blinking their eyes as they stared at the scene. In the sky, as if right above Ghost King's head, a sudden clap of thunder suddenly exploded. That strange beast forcefully crashed onto the light wall. Rumble. The thunder rumbled, resounding through the horizon. In that instant, that huge, spectacular red light wall trembled incessantly. Innumerable tiny electric currents like lightning crisscrossed on the light wall. The sound was ear-piercing. Even those black-attired men who were only separated by a light wall beneath the huge beast's feet trembled incessantly. In the midair, Ghost King's face also seemed to immediately turn pale. But finally, after the violent tremors, this red light wall did not break, but gradually stabilized, and that ancient cauldron beneath Ghost King's feet seemed to become even more dazzling. Ayo, 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 ayo. The infuriated huge beast almost fell into madness. At the same time as the clap of thunder continued to explode in the horizon, this strange beast's entire body glowed with green light. Again and again it crashed onto this huge light wall that trapped it. The wind and rain howled between heaven and earth, as if above the ninth heaven. There was also the thunder deity's furious roar. That bursts of booming thunder, every strike seemed to shake Lubo Hill, shook the entire stretch of the sea. But under the heaven and earth's tremendous might, that red light wall, including that ancient cauldron in the sky, for some unknown reason, still stood tall and sturdy. Gradually, instead it suppressed this strange beast's imposing manner. Time passed quietly. That strange beast's ramming also became weaker and weaker, but on the other hand, the evil faction side seemed to be not having it easy either. Ghost King, who was standing on top of the ancient cauldron in the midair, was slightly better, just that his face was pale, obviously to conjure a spell to trap this kind of ancient strange beast, even with that strange magical weapon ancient cauldron's help. It was definitely not easy. Chapter 136. And the dozens of black-attired men on the ground. Right now, more than half of them had already fallen to the ground. They were actually killed by these two tremendous forces. The remaining people looked to be all over the place. Only a few people with high cultivation were still standing around the light screen. The wind and rain, at this moment, also gradually receded, as if foretelling something. Finally, after the last collision of the mystical beast was useless, it panted and let out a low roar. It stood where it was, no longer moving. The Qing Yun sect people who regained their senses looked at each other, and for a moment could not say a word. After a while, Amanla asked Xavion, "To Shixian, what should we do?" Sha Danan also looked at Xavion. That soul-stirring battle made his heart beat faster. For some reason, he sympathized with the strange beast. Deep in his heart, he wanted to help it. Actually, among the Jadian disciples, it is not like Sha Danan did not have the same thought. After all, they had been enemies with the Falcon for thousands of years, and saw the Falcon spent so much effort to capture the strange beast. It must be a big deal. But Xavion, as the Shi Xiang, after a moment of silence, finally shook his head, said, "We better not get into trouble. Let's go." Everyone looked at each other. No one said anything. After all, they knew it was not the right time, so they followed Xavion. Sha Danan, who was walking at the back, suddenly found Anan did not follow. He was surprised, turned around, and saw Anan was standing there, did not move. He asked curiously, "Lu Shiji, what happened to you?" Anan looked at the strange beast that was trapped in the red light wall. It lowered its head, as if it had accepted its fate, standing there listlessly. The dark clouds in the sky were gradually dispersing. The power that changed the color of the sky and earth when it just left the sea could no longer be seen. Like a sad child at the end of the road, standing there with a dead heart. A little desolation, a little loneliness. Clang, the blue light, like a meteor in the night, brightened the surrounding darkness. Eolin Firmus was unsheathed. The clear blue light flashed, reflected on its beautiful master's face. There was a faint coldness, a quiet gaze. Anan slowly turned her head, looked at Shah Danan. Her face was as cold as water, said lightly, "This strange beast seems to be very important. You all quickly leave. I will be back soon." Everyone startled. Shah Danan slightly opened his mouth, said, "You?" Before she finished speaking, the beautiful figure turned into a brilliant meteor in the night sky. She pierced through the surrounding darkness and charged straight at the huge red wall of light. The Jadian people were pale. Shah Danan, Hidi, Amanla, almost at the same time, Amanla called the Xavion to Shixiao. Song Darren's forehead was dripping with sweat. If he were to leave, he was afraid that he would not be able to get past everyone. He would not be able to get past his own heart, but if he were to stay, he would most likely be in danger. These junior brothers and sisters were young and insensible, but he had to think about their lives. At that moment, his mind was in a mess. But Anan's speed was extremely fast. In a blink of an eye, she arrived at the beach where the falcon's light circle was. The falcon already found something was wrong. Screams rose. Master Vim was still floating in midair. His face gradually calmed down. He looked down, frowned, murmured, "Aeolian Firmus?" Those evil sect black-attired men were caught off guard by Anan's sudden attack, and were at a loss of what to do. And the Ghost King in the air also did not seem to be able to come down in time. Even that strange beast which was trapped in the light screen suddenly struggled open its eyes. Suddenly, a clear light came out from halfway, forcibly blocked Lu Sweki. Tianya's celestial sword emitted a sharp sound, forced this ball of clear light back a few steps, but Lu Sweki herself was also blocked several zhongs away from that red light screen. Azure Dragon, who was still dressed in white, suddenly appeared in front of Lu Sweki like a ghost. At the same time, his right hand, which was wearing the ring of universe clear light, returned to his sleeve. This lady, Qing Long smiled, as if he did not regard Lu Sweki as an enemy, said, "This Kuei Nyo, Note 1, is something that we have expended a great deal of effort to trap, and it is not harmful to your sect. Why should we start a dispute over this?" Lu Sweki inhaled deeply, knew that this person's skills were unfathomable. She was most likely not his match, but her eyes moved. Her eyes landed on that strange beast Kuei Nyo, saw that Kuei Nyo was also looking over. Its eyes were bright. Its mouth was even making a low roar, really did not know what it was thinking right now. "Evildoer," she suddenly shouted, ignoring everything else. Aeolian Firmus glowed with bright blue light and charged at Azure Dragon. Azure Dragon startled, but facing Aeolian Firmus, no matter how high his cultivation is, he did not dare to underestimate it. He could only frown and focus. The blue light and clear light were fighting. But Azure Dragon's cultivation was higher than Anan, and the ring of clear light did not seem to lose to Aeolian Firmus. After a while, Aeolian Firmus gained the upper hand. The clear light gradually suppressed the blue light. Shah Danan was anxious. He turned his head. Xavion gritted his teeth, said, "Shao Shimi, you and Shao Shidi immediately take fourth Shixiang and leave. Bishu and I will go help. If there is a gap, we will come immediately." Hidi said to Shixiang, "I." Xavion stared at her, said angrily, "I don't have time to talk nonsense with you now. Go quickly." Then he called Amandla and immediately rushed toward the center of the field, leaving Shah Danan and Hidi standing there. Actually, according to Xavion's intention, he did not want to meddle in this business, but Anan was from the faction. He could not ignore it. But the situation was dangerous. The other side also had Master Vim and Azure Dragon, the two great devils. Under the urgent situation, he could only take care of Shao Shidi and Shao Shimi. Go and take a look. If there's a chance to leave, he will leave. Tian Linger was scolded by Song Darren and was instead startled for a moment. Since young, Song Darren had always doted on her and had never scolded her with a single word. Today, when he suddenly scolded her, she was still unable to react. But after all, she was an outstanding disciple of Jadian, and her temperament was quite spoiled since young. She frowned and pondered for a moment, then said to Shah Danan, "Shao Fan, You stay here and take care of Fort Xixiang. I will go help. Sha Danan was surprised, but before he could speak, the injured Hidaji was already struggling and shouted, "Xiao Shimmy, it is dangerous there. You cannot go." But once Hidi made up her mind, how could she still listen to him? At this moment, unless Tian Belize was here, he could still control her. Hidaji's words, however, could only be ignored by her. Hidaji saw Hidi ignored him, was about to turn around, hurriedly said to Sha Danan, "Xiao Shidi, quickly hold her." Sha Danan was startled, quickly ran over and pulled Hidi's sleeve, hurriedly said, "Shiji, don't go. You stay here, I will go help." Before the word busy left his mouth, Hidi was impatient, shook off Sha Danan. Sha Danan, in a hurry, wanted to hold Hidi again, but unexpectedly, at this moment, when Hidi shook her hand and rose up, a small round object suddenly fell from her sleeve. A beautiful and smooth stone quietly slid down in the night. Indistinctly, there seemed to be a girl laughing and saying, "After we return, I will give this stone to Jade. He will definitely like it." He was suddenly dumbfounded. The hand that was stretched out in midair stopped at the spot, motionless, until Hidaji's anxious voice shouted from behind, "Xiao Shidi, why don't you hold her?" Sha Danan's body shook, suddenly woke up, cold sweat broke out all over his body. Quickly looked over, saw Hidi had already controlled Phoenix Soul, flew toward the center of the field. Immediately he did not think much, quickly controlled the fire stick, and chased after. Tian Linger flew to midair and saw that Xavian and Du Baishu had already joined in the battle between Lu Sueki and Qing Long. But Qing Long, 1 against 3, did not seem to be at a disadvantage. Instead, he looked calm and unruffled, skillful and at ease. Although Hidi was impatient, but she was talented and intelligent. At one glance, she could see Qing Long's cultivation was too high, and his esper was also strong. Even if she joined in, they still might not be able to defeat him. Her eyes turned, immediately came up with another idea, did not fly toward Ainin and others, but changed direction, quietly flew toward the other side of the large light screen. Sha Danan followed behind, pale with fright, but the falcons seemed to be attracted by Azure Dragon fighting 1 against 3, even the Vim King who was at the top controlling the formation. His eyes were also following Ainin's Aeolian Firmus, and for a moment also neglected Hidi's side. In the blink of an eye, Tian Linger neared the other side of the light screen. The black-attired men who were originally guarding this place were already lying on the ground in disorder. Obviously, they were killed in the violent battle that trapped the Kuei Nyo. Tian Linger's eyes swept across, suddenly noticed that all the red lights were emitted from some strange dark red, iron, all-like objects that were inserted into the sand, and then continuously shot upwards, converging into the ancient cauldron below Ghost King's feet. Obviously, the formation formed by these objects and the ancient cauldron in midair was the key to trapping Kay. Tian Linger did not think too much. With a wave of her jade-like fingers, the amber vermilion silk immediately flew out, directly sweeping towards those things that were stuck upside down on the beach. Bang! With a loud bang, the amber vermilion soul hit an iron all that was enveloped by a red curtain of light. Note 1. Classic of mountains and seas. Great Eastern scripture, East Sea Kuei. In the East Sea there is Billows Hill, 7,000 miles into the sea. On it there is a beast, shaped like a cow, black body, without horns, 1 leg. When it enters water there will be wind and rain. Its light is like the sun and moon. Its sound is like thunder. Its name is Kuei. Also note, Strange Tales of Gods and Demons. Spirit Beast Chapter, Kuei. Ancient strange beast, shaped like a green cow, 3 legs without horns, roar like thunder. Living in deep sea for a long time. Only appear once every 3,000 years. When it appears, there will be wind and rain, thunder and lightning. People call it the Mount of Thunder God. Here is using classic of mountains and seas. Chapter 137. The red light screen immediately trembled. Ghost King and the rest of the evil faction black-attired men in the air, including the trapped strange beast Kuei Nyo, almost at the same time, turned their heads to look. The red light flashed. Tian Linger was shocked, The red light surrounding the dark red iron all was trembling, but under the protection of the red light, it did not move at all. In a moment, the surrounding people had already reacted. The evil faction black-attired men all rushed over. Tian Linger's face was pale, slightly panting. At the moment of anxiety, suddenly her eyes lit up, both her hands waved, the amber vermilion soul drilled into the ground. In the air, Ghost King's face immediately changed, stamped his feet, and angrily said, "Little girl doesn't know life from death, spoiling my big plan." His figure flashed again and again, pouncing down with unparalleled ferocity, but at this moment, sharp whistling sounds rose and fell from afar. In that instant, innumerable lights lit up. It was actually the good faction and evil faction's large group of people, killing and stopping. The most intense was Taoist Song Song against Bai Duzi, Tian Bui against Elder Duanmu, and Suru right now was fighting one against two, blocking the injured blood-sucking demon and that young Master Lin Fengat. Forsaken Abyss. As for the others, such as Tian'in Temple monks and Fenxiang Valley disciples, including vigorous venerable teacher and disciple, all came here. Many of them came here and suddenly saw such a huge light wall on this beach, and in it trapped a grotesquely shaped huge strange beast. For a moment their hands slowed down. Bai Duzi and Elder Duanmu leapt away at the same time, abandoning Taoist Song Song and Tian Bui. Taoist Song Song and Tian Bui right now also did not have the heart to continue fighting and let them go, especially Tian Bui. Looking from afar, it seemed like his own daughter was heavily surrounded by the evil faction people. His face could not help but change color and was about to pounce over there. Bai Duzi and Ancestor Duanmu stood together and first looked towards Qing Long's battle. Seeing that Qing Long was fighting one against three with ease, his expression changed and he snorted. He then looked towards the sky and saw the Ghost King pouncing down, but the ancient cauldron was still slowly rotating in the air, red light shooting out in all directions. Bai Duzi suddenly frowned and said in a deep voice, "Hidden Dragon Cauldron." Elder Duanmu, who was standing at the side, was shocked and quickly looked towards the sky. He was also stunned for a moment. Both of them are the most senior members of the evil cult. Their knowledge and foresight were far from what the average evil cult followers could compare to. Looking from afar, that ancient cauldron had a simple and unsophisticated shape. The two rings on the cauldron were carved with a dragon head relief, and in addition to this mysterious formation before their eyes, it was extremely similar to the evil cult's legendary entrapped dragon watchtower. And this kind of mysterious entrapped dragon watchtower formation had always required the hidden dragon cauldron to be used. With the spiritual energy of the hidden dragon cauldron as the medium, it could incite the murderous aura of heaven and earth. No matter how high your cultivation was, you would still be trapped within, unable to escape. Speaking of which, unless it was such a peerless treasure, it would be difficult for the Ghost King and the others to trap an ancient beast like the Kuei cow. Returning to the scene, by this time, the other people who were fighting had already temporarily stopped. Their attention was attracted here. Ghost King was swiftly pouncing down from midair, and Tian Bui was concerned about his beloved daughter. Although he was far away, he still rode his sword and rushed over. And nearby, because Zhang Xiao Danan was the first to arrive, he was the person closest to Heidi, but beside him, there were already several black, clothed evil cult people also pouncing over. The situation was about to explode, and the key point was all on Heidi. Zhang Xiao Danan saw the black-clothed people were about to arrive. His heart was anxious. He leaped with strength, flew behind Heidi. When he was in midair, the fire stick was already glowing with green light, swept down a light wall in front of the black-clothed people. Those black-clothed people all screamed. In that instant, several espers attacked. Zhang Xiao Danan's body shook greatly, but in the end, he managed to block those people for a while. And at this moment, Tian Linger cheered. The amber vermilion soul drilled out from the ground and forcefully pushed an iron awl out. Immediately, the red light shook violently. The entire entrapped dragon watchtower's formation flashed chaotically. The formation was in chaos, especially in front of Heidi. In a short moment, a hole the height of a person broke open. Inside the red light wall, the strange beast Kuei Neo gave a long howl. The sound shook the surroundings. One leg exerted strength and charged over. Heety's face was filled with joy, was about to call back the Esper Phoenix soul. Suddenly, she heard Zhang Xiao Danan's cry behind her, "Shiji, be careful." She was startled, abruptly raised her head to see that huge strange beast had already charged in front of her with a loud bang. That huge body heavily hit on the light wall. At this moment, entrapped Dragon Watchtower's formation was already in chaos. After being hit by this huge force, the originally height of a person immediately spread out in a short while it became several times bigger, almost able to let Kuei Neo out. And at the same time, the red light shook chaotically, waves shot out in all directions. It actually blocked Ghost King's pouncing figure to the side. At this moment, Kuei Neo's pair of huge eyes were wide open, shooting out ominous light. It did not care that it was Heety that shook this strange formation. With a loud roar, its huge head swayed and actually bit toward Heety. Heety turned pale with fright, saw a bloody mouth coming toward her. The stench of blood assailed her nostrils. For a moment she was stunned, did not move at all. At this moment, seeing that Kuei Neo was about to break out of the encirclement, with its power of being trapped in entrapped Dragon Watchtower, all of the black-clothed men simultaneously retreated. Only Zhang Xiao Danan, in shock, still gritted his teeth and rushed forward. The fire stick flashed with green light, striking toward Kuei Neo's head. At a distance, Azure Dragon shook off Xavion's 10 Tigers' celestial sword, inadvertently glanced toward Zhang Xiao Danan. Just happened to see that fire stick rushing toward Kuei Neo. Suddenly his body shook, almost lost his mind, actually cried out involuntarily, "This!" In the field, that Kuei Neo was indeed an ancient strange beast. Feeling the Esper coming, its huge head swayed, actually used its head to directly hit the fire stick. Boom! The fire stick flew back. Zhang Xiao Danan's body shook, only felt a strong force almost covering the sky and earth. Surged toward him, ding, 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 continuously retreated a few steps. Being blocked by Zhang Xiao Danan, Heety had already recovered. Her face pale, was about to retreat. Unexpectedly, that Kuei Neo was played by these humans tonight, not knowing how many thousands of years it had lived, but presumably it had never encountered such an encounter. It was at the peak of anger, did not care who the person in front of it was. It wanted to kill first to vent its anger. Heety only took half a step back, just managed to call back Phoenix Soul, was about to fly up. That terrible, bloody mouth once again bit down on her head. The people at a distance screamed. The pale-faced Serene and Kevern rushed out together. Tion Belize, who was at the front, was flying like lightning, but the distance was too far, only a few feet away. It was difficult to help. But Heety, after all, was not an ordinary person. She was also not willing to die without a fight. In a moment of desperation, both of her hands waved, Phoenix Soul like a red dragon flying in the sky, blocking above her head, only hoping to block this giant beast for a while, then have a chance to escape. And Zhang Xiao Danan, who was standing closest to her, also leapt forward again. Not sure if it was because the red light of Phoenix Soul was similar to the red light of entrapped Dragon Watchtower. The fury in Kuei Neo's eyes was even heavier. Oh, ayo, ayo, ayo. In the roar, it was like Mount Tai pressing down, biting down. Once the contact, the difference between the two was obvious. Phoenix Soul was pressed down by Kuei Neo's huge mouth. Heety's face was pale. Both of her knees softened. She was forced to sit on the ground by the huge force, dust flying up. At this moment, she saw Zhang Xiao Danan was already in front of her. She hurriedly said, "Xiao Fan, quickly leave." How could Zhang Xiao Danan not know this strange beast was too strong? Becoming its enemy would only result in death. Unexpectedly, at the moment when the sky and earth changed, the wind and clouds changed. In front of the ferocious giant beast, the figure of such a weak girl anxiously shouted to him, "Quickly leave." The wind blew on his face like in the depth of his heart. There was something surging and excited. That familiar figure and face is right in front of you, the past years carved in your heart. At that moment, surged unceasingly. What is it that makes you crazy? What is it that makes you painful? Thinking of the sad skeleton in Bloodrop Cave? Thinking of the fox spirit who jumped into the lava together with him in Huolong Cave? He breathed deeply, breathed deeply. Heaven and earth, a field of silence. Holding the fire stick tightly, gritting his teeth, that young man's figure charged forward. Just like that, charged forward, recklessly charged forward, barged into between the giant beast and Hede, opened both of his hands, roared loudly, like a warrior going to his death, like a sorrowful hero, merged with the fire stick, as if 800 years of time, once again reappeared. Broken heart for whom? Crazy for whom? In Kuan Yo's raging roar, he was also roaring loudly. The fire stick burned with a never-seen-before bright light, like a flame using life as firewood, burning fiercely. Rumble. In the sky, a thunder roared, shook the firmament. Zhang Shao Danan's knees softened. Dark red blood flowed out from his 7 apertures, quietly slid down, dripped onto the fire stick. The stunned Hede suddenly felt her body lightened. Her whole body flew backward. It was Tian Bui who finally arrived and pulled her out. When Tian Bui hurriedly turned back, he saw Zhang Shao Danan was already pressed under Kuan Yo's body. Kuan Yo roared to the sky. Its huge body rose into the sky. One of its huge feet trampled on Zhang Shao Danan. The power was so great that everyone was shocked. Even Tian Bai's face turned pale. Zhang Shao Danan panted heavily. The bones in his body felt like they were about to shatter. He slowly raised his head. All he could see was the darkness pressing down from the sky. Dang, not sure. Who was it that dropped the weapon in his hand? And who was it crying out in despair in the darkness? A ray of golden, solemn light quietly burst out, accompanied by a ray of green light. On the fire stick in the young man's hand, countless tiny red veins like blood vessels suddenly glowed together under the shadow, as if burning lifeblood was flowing. The golden and green intertwining light suddenly bloomed from the fire stick, shone on his face, slowly in front of him. On the green sinister orb at the tip of the fire stick, a Buddhist incantation appeared. Then, as if it was coexisting with this incantation, on the base of the word Hui, a flickering green Tai Chi pattern appeared indistinctly. Everyone was stunned, except for Kuan Yo. That raging beast was already trampling down with unstoppable force. The young man who could not escape, the young man who was facing death, stretched out his hands, blocking upwards. Time seemed to have stopped for a moment. Heaven and earth rustled. The dark clouds once again became heavy. There was a cold wind, lightly blowing. There were leaves falling one after another. A figure suddenly appeared in mid-air, hurriedly pounced down, as fast as lightning. It was Ghost King. In a blink of an eye, he rushed to the ground, snatched the red iron awl that was forced out by Hede, immediately stabbed it into the sand. At the same time, his right hand immediately stretched out, slashed his left wrist. Immediately blood spurted out, sprayed onto the iron awl. In an instant, the red light flashed on top of the dark red, mysterious iron awl. Red light shot out everywhere. In a blink, before Kuan Yo landed, it had already connected with the surrounding light screen in front of Zhang Shao Danan. The entrapped dragon watchtower formation was once again activated. In midair, the hidden dragon cauldron shone brightly, illuminating half of the sky. Rumble. Amidst the loud noise, the Kuei cow crashed into the red light screen. The Ghost King's body shook violently and retreated a few steps, but the Kuei cow was also knocked back by the red light screen. Immediately, it rushed forward again in anger, but amidst the series of loud noises, it was finally powerless to escape. Ghost King slowly let out a sigh of relief, slowly relaxed his body, turned around, saw the young man behind him was still maintaining the state of resistance. But the light of the fire stick was slowly fading, but looking at his face, blood was flowing with a trace of desolation. Ghost King stared at him. Zhang Shao Danan slightly opened his mouth, also looked at him. In the field, suddenly it was quiet. Great Brahmin wisdom. This is great Brahmin wisdom. Suddenly, far behind, Skysong Temple monks all came out, including Fashion, All the monks were shocked, pointed at Zhang Shao Danan, and shouted, "How can you practice our Sky Song Temple's great Brahmin wisdom?" Only that Fazan silently stood behind the excited crowd, silently stared at Zhang Shao Danan. A light seemed to be flashing in his eyes. Zhang Shao Danan slowly turned around, as if every movement used up all of his strength, until he faced everyone. Tian Belise's face was green, stood there motionless. The veins on the hand that was holding scarlet flame, celestial sword popped out. All of the Jadian disciples, like seeing a monster for the first time, looked at this person, this young man covered with wounds. Behind, a deep sigh of Ghost King came. Heidi's face was extremely pale, took a few steps forward, then suddenly stopped. The short distance between her and Zhang Shao Danan suddenly became so far and uncrossable. "Shao Danan," she said quietly with a voice that even she could not believe. "These masters, what they said, is it true?" Zhang Shao Danan's lips began to tremble, as if the deepest fear rose little by little from the bottom of his heart. He looked at Heidi, looked at his master, looked at all of his faction members. Everyone's face was so unfamiliar. He suddenly wanted to shout, but opened his mouth. Not a single word came out. The night wind blew his clothes, gently fluttering. "That's right. It is sinister orb. It can't be wrong." Suddenly, as if he was still in a nightmare, another surprised shout sounded again. Qing Long stood at the side, his face full of astonishment. Once the words came out, everyone present, no matter Falcon or Righteous, all changed their countenance. That round orb at the top of his esper, blood veins wrapped around it. Just now, it also had sucking ability to Kuei Nyo. It must be Elder Blackheart's sinister orb 800 years ago. The crowd was in an uproar. Everyone's face was filled with astonishment. Only Zhang Shao Danan could not hear anything at all. In his feeling, everyone around him were making such a loud noise. Countless people were shouting at him, but he could not hear anything. He slowly turned around. Ghost King had already disappeared behind him. In front of him, there was only the strange beast Kuei Nyo trapped in the entrapped dragon watchtower's formation, turning in circles, but in the end, as if it had accepted its fate, stood still and let out a despairing roar to the sky. That voice reverberated in the empty night sky. It was exceptionally desolate. Zhang Shao Danan slowly raised his head, looked up at the sky. Ah, that cold night, dark and boundless, as if making people unable to breathe. He suddenly laughed, a hopeless laugh, a silent laugh. His body swayed, fell straight down, fell heavily on the ground. In front of him, it was pitch black, as if that endless dark night sky pressed down on him. Then he fainted. Chapter 138. This dream seemed to have passed 1,000 years. He walked alone in the darkness until he saw the village, a sunny and familiar place. He ran away, those familiar faces smiling at him, joking. The fresh air seemed sweet to his heart. Let him play on the grass next to the village, could not help but roll around freely, laugh heartily. Around, suddenly there were many more children rushed toward him. That always cheerful bay laughed and said, "Do you give up? Give up? Give up?" He whispered to himself, as if repeating the words of that year. The sky suddenly darkened, and the dark clouds hung low as if the sky had collapsed. The people around him suddenly disappeared, and the warm village in the distance also disappeared. Darkness fell on the earth, and only a faint beam of light shone on the frightened and helpless child. He suddenly screamed, "I give up! I give up!" He turned over and sat up, sweating, panting. "Shao Fan, what happened to you?" A familiar voice, startled, grabbed Shao Danan's shoulder and asked hurriedly. Shao Danan panted, looked toward him. Bei sat in front of the bed, his face nervous and a little haggard, staring at him. Shao Danan, startled, looked around. This is a small guest room. The furnishings are simple. The room only has a normal table, chairs, and a wooden bed. He is lying on the bed, covered with a thin quilt. He lowered his head, calmed himself down, said, "Nothing. I had a nightmare." Bei looked at him. The corner of his mouth moved, slowly loosened his hands. Shao Danan was silent for a moment, said, "Where are we?" Bay hesitated, said, "We have already left Billows Hill, now arrived at the East Sea's Changi City. This is a small inn in Changi City." Sha Danan was silent. The room suddenly became very quiet. After a while, Bay suddenly said, "Xiao Fan, do you have anything to say to me?" Sha Danan's shoulders seemed to shake, looked up at him. This childhood playmate at this moment deeply looked at him, but that kind of eyes is so strange. He lowered his head again, slowly said, "No, Jingyu." Lin Jingyu frowned. He wanted to say something, but in the end, he restrained himself. After another moment of silence, Sha Danan asked, "Why did we come back?" Lin Jingyu sighed and said, "That day at Lubo Hill, after you fainted when everyone saw you. Your appearance, they all looked at each other in dismay. Finally, my teacher and Tian teacher uncle discussed for a while and brought you back first. The devil cult seemed to be in a bit of a mess. Moreover, their attention seemed to be focused on that strange beast. They didn't try to stop us, so we returned to Changi City smoothly." Sha Danan was silent for a moment, said, "How long have I been like this?" Lin Jingyu said, "It has been 3 days." Sha Danan was silent for a while. Bei looked at him, annoyed, couldn't help but blurted out, "Xiao Fan, what happened to you? Why do you have?" "Bei!" Sha Danan suddenly shouted, interrupting Bei's question. Lin Jingyu was stunned for a moment, looking at him. Sha Danan's voice was also a bit hoarse. He didn't look at Bei's expression, only lowered his head and said quietly, Don't ask anymore, okay?" Bei gritted his teeth, stood up, looked at Sha Danan for a long time, finally turned and walked outside. But when he almost reached the door, he suddenly turned and said to Sha Danan, "Xiao Fan, don't worry, no matter what your reason is, I believe you. I will definitely ask teacher to speak for you." Sha Danan sat on the bed, motionless, as if he didn't hear it. Bei looked at him again, then resolutely turned and walked out. Outside the door, there seemed to be people standing there. Bei whispered a few words to them. Then his footsteps gradually went away. The room was very quiet. After a long time, Sha Danan slowly raised his head, lifted the quilt, saw he was still wearing the clothes he wore on Lubo Hill. It seemed like no one changed it for him. He subconsciously reached out his hand to touch the bed, but suddenly his hand stopped in midair. It was empty. The fire stick that had been with him all these years was nowhere to be found. He sat there, startled, his lips slightly trembling. Suddenly, he quickly got out of bed, ran straight to the door of the room, and pulled it open. The two people standing outside the door turned around, surprised. It was Xavion and Amandla. Seeing Sha Danan, their faces seemed a bit strange. After a while, Amandla laughed dryly, said, Xiao Shitty, you woke up?" A ray of sunlight from the sky behind them shined on Sha Danan's face. Sha Danan suddenly felt a little dizzy. His body also shook a little. Xavion's face changed, subconsciously wanted to help him, but when his hand reached out, he suddenly retracted it. Sha Danan was startled. Looking at him, this to Shi Xiang, who loved him since childhood, his face was as pale as paper. The corner of Xavion's mouth moved. Finally, slowly said, "Xiao Shitty, your body is injured. It is better to stay in the room and rest. Don't come out and walk around." Sha Danan slowly retracted his body. When he was about to turn around, he suddenly said, "To Shi Xiang, where's my fire stick?" Xavion and Du Baishu's faces changed. After a while, Xavion then lightly said, "Xiao Shitty, your magical weapon is temporarily kept by Master. You don't have to worry." Sha Danan did not say anything, turned around, gently closed the door. In another corner of the inn, in a secluded room, Master Vaskalo, Tian Belize, and Eno were sitting together. On the small round table in the middle of the three of them, a greenish-black fire stick was quietly placed there. Suddenly, a hand reached out and took the fire stick. It was Master Vaskalo. He placed the fire stick in front of him, using his hand to gently stroke it. When his fingers touched the sinister orb at the tip, his eyes seemed to glimmer. After a long while, he indifferently said, "So this is the sinister orb?" Tian Belize suddenly snorted coldly. Eno looked at Tian Belize, then at Master Vaskalo, said, "Tu Shu, what should we do now? Please enlighten us." Master Vaskalo looked at Eno, lightly said, Shao Shurji, you're always resourceful. Why don't you say it? Master Vaskalo shook his head, said, This matter is too important. I don't know what to say. Master Vaskalo looked at Tian Beli's pale face, said, Now the most troublesome is Sky Song Temple's friends. They kept asking us how Sha Danan learned Fawn wisdom of Great Brahmin. If not because their leader Fezan is reasonable and tried to suppress them, they would have already asked us for Sha Danan. Tian Belis coldly said, They want to ask for Sha Danan? That will have to wait until we get to the bottom of it. Then we can say our disciple is in trouble. It is not their turn to interfere. Taoist Song Song frowned and was about to say something, but Xiao Yikai had already opened his mouth and said, Speaking of this, Tian teacher uncle, this morning I met Fun Xiang Valley senior brother Li. He too wants someone from us. Master Vaskalo startled. Tian Belis rolled his eyes, said angrily, What does this have to do with Incense Valley? Eno said quietly, Tian Shirshu, calm down. Actually, I also think Incense Valley is being unreasonable. Li Sun Li Shixiang said, That day he and Zhang Shidi entered a fox spirit's lair at Black Dray Cave to investigate one of their Incense Valley's treasure. Zhang Shidi was the first to arrive. When they arrived, the fox spirit was already dead, but the treasure was nowhere to be seen. Zhang Shidi said he had never seen this treasure before. At that time, they felt it was strange. Now it seems like it was Zhang Shidi who stole. Punk, a loud sound, it was Tian Bui who, in his rage, slammed his palm heavily on the table. A few caca sounds were heard. The table shook and fell down. The legs of the table had already been broken by this slap. Eno looked a little embarrassed. Master Vaskalo frowned, snorted, said, These people from Incense Valley are obviously up to no good. This kind of thing without any evidence, do not care about them. Eno Ikai nodded and said, Actually, for Incense Valley, we could just evade for a while, and it will be fine, but this time Zhang Shidi in front of everyone. Many of our comrades are asking us Qing Yun sect to stand out and give an explanation, explain clearly why the evil faction evil item from 800 years ago would be on our Qing Yun sect disciple. Tian Belis clenched his hands into fists. From time to time, light crackling sounds could be heard. His expression was extremely ugly, scolded in a low voice. This little bastard. Master Vaskalo slowly said, Tian Shidi, you don't have to be too angry. This kind of thing is unexpected. Just that now the situation is too serious. And even more involves Tian'in Temple and the evil faction. This matter is too big. I think we still have to return as soon as possible. Ask Sec Head Shixiang before making a decision. Tian Bui let out a deep breath, but after all he had trained for many years, immediately suppressed the anger in his heart, nodded his head and said, All right, then we will move immediately. While speaking, his eyes turned and looked at the fire stick in Taoist Vaskalo's hand. Unexpectedly, Master Vaskalo smiled, put the fire stick into his bosom. Tian Belis' expression changed. Eno Ikai also frowned, said, Vaskalo teacher uncle, this Esper. Master Vaskalo waved his hand at him, turned to Tian Belis and said, Tian Shidi, such a thing happened to your sect disciple, has already caused our Qing Yun sect to lose face in front of the world's good faction, and even offended Tian'in Temple. You as a teacher, I'm afraid you have to bear some responsibility. Tian Belis snorted, his pupils contracted, coldly said, So what? Master Vaskalo indifferently said, I am the person in charge of punishment in Qing Yun sect. This evidence is placed with me. I believe Tian Shidi, you will not have any thoughts about it. Chapter 139. Tian Belis stared at Master Vaskalo for a while, suddenly stomped his foot and walked out angrily. On the streets of Changhe, it was still bustling with people as usual. Tanis Xian and Tani stood at a corner of the street, looking at a small inn with a signboard of EC Inn, frowned together. Tani licked the candied haw in her hand, made a satisfied sound, then casually said to Taniska, Grandpa, are you sure Jadian people are staying here? Taniska nodded. Nonsense. Didn't you see the people walking in and out of the inn are all cultivators of refinement? Then he said to himself, These people went to Billows Hill for a long time. I wonder what will be the result when they come back. Xiao Huan rolled her eyes at him, said, I really don't understand you. If we say you are from Qingyun's sect, you don't dare to go and acknowledge your family. If we say you are not, why are you so concerned? Tanis Ka choked, said angrily, Grandpa, although I disdain to acknowledge the younger generation of Jadian, that is because I have already seen through the ways of the world. I am willing to live a poor life, roam the world, do something for the common people. Tani turned and left. Tanis Ka swallowed the rest of his boasting words, snorted, glanced at EC in one last time, turned and left. Tani said while walking, You still have a nerve to say that. We were going to Billows Hill to have a look, but after asking at the EC for more than 10 days, we still can't find a boatman to take us there. Tanis Ka felt embarrassed, laughed dryly. That is because those boatmen have no knowledge. How can they not even know where Billows Hill is? They are all good-for-nothings. At the same time, he thought he would lose his face in front of his granddaughter if he kept mentioning these things. So he changed the topic. I wonder if that guy called Shaw Dannon will die on Billows Hill. Xiao Huan glared at him, said, Don't talk nonsense. That day, I have seen his palmistry. Although this person's fortune is unusual, it is the sign of chaotic evil, but his longevity has nothing to do with fortune. He is not a short-lived person. Tanis Ka laughed, said to Tani, Speaking of which, I'm more and more curious to know, that day in the full moon ancient well outside the Black Rock Cave, what did he see? Xiao Huan giggled and said, You still remember? Tanis Ka nodded and said, That's right. You should know that the Chaos Devil phenomenon is 1 in a million. I'm getting more and more curious about that guy. Xiao Huan nodded repeatedly, smiled, and said, Actually, me too. Both of them were laughing and talking. For a moment, they forgot what was in front of them. Suddenly, they realized there was a figure in front of them. They almost bumped into it, immediately jumped in fright, quickly stopped, and finally steadied themselves. Zhou Yixian angrily said, What are you guys doing? But before he could finish, his voice immediately became hoarse. Xiao Huan was surprised and looked forward. She was also surprised. There were 2 people standing in front of them. The one in front was a pretty and beautiful girl wearing a green dress. It was Bailu who made them suffer a lot. Behind Bailu, there was a girl in black dress. Her face was covered with a black veil. They could not see her face clearly. Tanis Yixian laughed dryly, repeatedly said, I was wrong, I was wrong. While speaking, he winked at Xiao Huan. Although Xiao Huan was young, but she was quick-witted, immediately understood. Both of them were about to turn and run. Unexpectedly, their bodies felt light. They were picked up by the 2 women. Then their vision swayed. The people on the street turned upside down. When they woke up, they were already in a secluded alley with no one around. Tanis Ka's forehead was sweating. He knew that the girl in front of him was much stronger than him. He didn't know what he was going to suffer. He gave Tanis Ka a glare and said, Miss Sai, I was wrong that day. I will return you the silvers. Please be magnanimous and let us go. Bailu frowned. Ever since they came back from Lubo Hill, she looked haggard. She glared at Tanis Ka and said, Who wants your silvers? I was wrong that day. I will return you the silvers. Please be magnanimous and let us go. Tanis Ka immediately said, Miss, please ask. I will answer everything I know. I don't know if you want to ask about fortune or longevity or marriage. These are my, Tanis Ka, great immortal Zhou's specialty. Come, let me tell your fortune. He was talking more and more smoothly. Suddenly, he felt Xiao Huan was pulling his clothes. He turned around in surprise and asked, What's wrong? Xiao Huan was sweating. She rolled her eyes at him and smiled apologetically at Bailu. This, beautiful big sister, what do you want to ask us? Bailu was silent for a moment and said, Why were you looking at the entrance of East Xian? Tanis Ka and Xiao Huan looked at each other and said, No, nothing. We just happened to pass by. We saw a lot of cultivators there, so we stopped to take a look. Bailu said lightly, So, Jadian's people are all staying there? Tanis Ka nodded and said, Seems so. Bailu was silent for a while, then said, Then, did you see the Jadian's young disciple who saved you? Tanis Ka startled, then understood, said, Miss, you mean that young man called Shaw Dannon? Bala did not expect them to know Shaw Dannon's name. She nodded, said, What? You saw him? Her face showed concern. Taniska and Xiao Huan shook their heads at the same time. Bila was disappointed. She was about to say something, but suddenly her interest was gone. She waved her hand, said, "You can leave." Taniska and Tani felt like they were listening to heavenly music. They immediately thanked her and quickly walked out of the alley. Unexpectedly, after a few steps, Bailu suddenly said, "Wait." Taniska's heart skipped a beat. Bailu slowly said, "You said there's a full moon ancient well outside the Dark Drake Cave. What does that mean?" Taniska was relieved, quickly told her the story of the full moon ancient well, then said, That's it. Legend says at the night of the full moon, people only need to look into the full moon ancient well. Then they will see their most beloved person." Bila's face changed. She did not say anything and was lost in thought. Taniska was still wondering what other strange questions this ever-changing girl had. Suddenly, he was pulled by Xiao Huan. Seeing Xiao Huan's eye signal, he came back to himself. The two of them slowly walked out. Bailu and the mysterious woman in black did not stop them. After a while, there was only Bailu and the mysterious woman in black veil left in the quiet alley. "Aunt Nigar, who do you think he saw?" The words had just left her mouth. She suddenly smiled bitterly, her smile bitter. Actually, needless to say, it must be his Linger senior sister. If not, it must be that peerless beauty Tianya, celestial sword user from Chinyan's sect. What am I? The mysterious woman called Aunt Nigar by Bailu said lightly, "Don't be like this. These men, sometimes they don't understand their own feelings." Bailu closed her eyes, opened them after a while, with a hint of pleading, said to the woman in black, "Aunt Nigar, I want to go see him." The woman in black immediately shook her head, said, "No." Bailu sorrowfully said, "Aunt Nigar, his current situation is worse than death. I really can't let it go in my heart." The woman in black sighed softly, said, "Your father knows you will act recklessly, so he told me to keep an eye on you. Right now, a large number of Jadian's masters are in this inn. If we go rashly, it will be unavoidable." At this point, her voice was filled with pity, and she said softly, "Yeah, there's still a long way to go. We'll definitely meet him again." Bailu stood there in a daze, said after a while, But what he did is the taboo of the righteous. Will they just kill him like this?" The woman in black frowned, shook her head. "Bailu, wake up. Normally, you are not this muddle-headed. Shah Danan is suspected to be related to our holy faction because he possesses sinister orb. More importantly, he is also practicing Skysong Temple's fawn wisdom. This is not a small matter. If we cannot find out the truth, Skysong Temple will not let Jadian go. I am sure Jadian will bring Shah Danan back to Mount Jadian and let Doyle Shun make the decision himself and give Skysong Temple an explanation. So he will be fine for now." Bila bit her pale lower lip. After a long while, she did not have any reaction. The woman in black saw this and seemed to feel sorry for her. She gently stroked her hair and comforted her in a low voice. "It's okay. Don't worry. Didn't your father say that he won't sit back and do nothing?" Bila nodded silently. Suddenly, she raised her head, grabbed the woman in black's hand, hurriedly said, "Aunt Negari, I know you have not done anything for a long time, but please, for my sake, help him." The woman in black was silent for a moment. Her eyes moved away, looked outside of the alley. Bailu called again, "Aunt Negari." The woman in black sighed softly, said, "All right, if your father decided to save him, I will also help you once." Bailu was overjoyed. The black-clothed woman smiled, but her smile was hidden in the black veil. No one could see it, just like no one could see the ripples in the depths of her heart. That dark and austere night, when that youth resolutely pounced towards that ferocious giant beast without any regard for his own life, her heart palpitated in the darkness. Vaguely, many years ago, the figure in white like snow. Even the expressions on their faces seemed to have some resemblance to each other. Chapter 140. Jadian again. When Shah Danan once again saw Mount Jadian, it had been several months since the last time he went down the mountain with Anan, Kevern, and Issa. The mountain peak was still towering, piercing through the clouds, still ethereal, solemn and sacred, But Shah Danan's situation had completely changed. After Tion Belize and Master Vasp Kalo discussed, Shah Danan was temporarily brought back to Bamboo Peak by Tion Belize. Master Vasp Kalo and Xiao Ikai returned to report to head Master Doyle Shan in detail, then make a decision. And because Shah Danan had lost his fire stick, he could not fly, so it was the Shixiang Xavion who brought him back. Bamboo Peak pierced through the clouds. All sides were cliffs. Shah Danan, who had lost his fire stick, looked like he was under house arrest. As the rays of light flashed, the people of Big Bamboo Peak finally returned to Big Bamboo Peak after a long time. Shah Danan walked down from the Shixiang's 10 tigers, celestial sword expressionlessly, stood at the side silently. Tion Belize did not even look at him. With a very ugly face, he directly returned to Hall of Quietude. Wu Dai and the rest who were guarding Big Bamboo Valley came up to welcome them, were momentarily stunned. All looked at Suru and Xavion with puzzled gazes. Suru sighed slightly, shook her head, did not have the mood to speak, turned and spoke to Xavion. Darren, I leave this place to you. Song Darren hurriedly responded. Serene turned and looked at Shah Danan, who was standing at the side without saying a word. Saw his face was haggard. Within these few days he had lost a lot of weight. She could not bear it, subconsciously took a step forward, but then stopped, shook her head, sighed, turned and walked away. Hedy turned and looked at Shah Danan, then followed her mother without saying a word. Xavion laughed dryly. His expression was a little strange, said to Shah Danan, Shao Shitty, since we have returned, you go back to your room to rest. But you better not wander around. Shah Danan raised his head, slowly nodded, said, "The Shi Xiang, I understand." After speaking, he walked alone towards the Big Bamboo Valley disciples' residence. Not far away, he heard whispers of conversation behind him. Obviously Wu Dai and the rest, who were full of questions, were questioning Xavion and Dubai Shu. Although Shah Danan could not see it, the invisible gaze behind him was like a needle stabbing Shah Danan's back. Not far away, suddenly 2 cheerful barks came from Bamboo Peak. Shah Danan raised his head and was startled. He saw Ash, who he hadn't seen for a long time, was riding on Big Yellow's back, both hands holding Big Yellow's shiny fur. Big Yellow stuck out half of its tongue and barked excitedly all the way over. Shah Danan suddenly felt his eyes were hot. Even his body was slightly trembling. Very quickly, Big Yellow ran in front of Shah Danan. Ash squeaked and jumped onto Shah Danan's shoulder. It laughed happily and habitually rubbed Shah Danan's head with its claws. As for Big Yellow, it was also very affectionate to Shah Danan. Its big dog head kept rubbing Shah Danan's feet. Was it missing the meat bone that Shah Danan made again? Shah Danan was excited. He squatted down and gently stroked Big Yellow's head. Big Yellow hummed softly. Its 2 ears obediently lowered and rubbed Shah Danan's palm. Ash was squeaking and laughing. Its tail swung here and there, not letting go of Shah Danan. Wu Dai, who was standing at a distance, murmured, "These 2 beasts, I have carefully taken care of them for months, but they have never been so affectionate to me before." Soon, under everyone's gaze, Shah Danan stood up and walked towards his residence. Ash sat on his shoulder. Big Yellow also followed. It seemed only at this moment Shah Danan's figure did not seem so lonely. At a distant place at the foot of Jadian Hill, Bailu and the mysterious black-clothed Lady Yuji were standing side by side, looking at the mountain peak hidden in the white clouds. Bailu's face was a little pale, her eyebrows frowned. She looked more haggard. Her expression was also a little absent-minded. After staring for a while, she slowly said, "Don't know how he is now." The black veil on Yuji's face moved slightly. She turned her head and looked at the girl who was suffering from love, softly said, "It's okay, Bailu, don't think too much." Bailu bit her lips, suddenly asked, "Where is my dad?" Yuji said, "Headmaster went to Sunstream City today to meet that old monster from Wandu clan who just arrived." Bailu was surprised, said, "What? God of Poison also came?" Yuji smiled faintly, said, "Not only him. According to what I heard privately, in the next few days, even the headmasters of Longevity Hall and Hahuan will also come here." Bailu was even more surprised, said after a while, "How can it be like this? I know Dad has already secretly moved the main forces of Vim to Jadian Hill. If the three headmasters come, their masters will also come, then won't it mean that our four big? No, basically the Holy Faction's forces are all gathered here." Yuji's face was hidden behind her black veil. Her expression could not be seen clearly. But her voice was still calm and said, "That's right." Bailu suddenly lowered her head. After a while, said slowly, "So, the main purpose of Dad coming here is not to save Shah Danon." Yuji said lightly, "Bailu, don't think too much. Headmaster is a man of his word, and you are his only daughter. He will not lie to you. As for this time, the Holy Faction forsaking the past is also your dad's strong suggestion. In order to avenge the humiliation 100 years ago, the headmasters of the four factions swore under King Vidyaraja's throne to attack Jadian when they are unprepared." Bailu was silent for a moment, said, "If this battle is successful, Dad's reputation in the Holy Faction will rise. Even if he is defeated, he will have a good reputation of avenging the seniors' humiliation." But she suddenly raised her voice, her face was a little excited, said, "But I don't care about that. Also don't want to care. I just want Shah Danon to be well, don't." "Bailu," Yuji suddenly shouted. Bailu, startled, looked at her, but did not continue. She turned her head and stared at the white clouds far away, stunned. In a secluded mansion in Sunstream City, Master Vim and Qing Long slowly walked in. Along the way, people respectfully led them to the inside. This mansion was Wandu's stronghold in Sunstream City. It was also today that the headmaster of Wandu, the oldest among the headmasters of the four main Falcon factions, God of Poison, came here. 100 years ago, the evil sect and the good faction had a big battle at Qingyun Hill, killing until the sky was dark, but in the end the evil sect was still defeated, and after that, the evil sect suffered a great loss. Among the four big sects, 3 of them changed their heads, among which Ghost King was also at that time, took over the previous Ghost King's sect head position. But among the various sects, only Wandu clan's old monster, God of Poison, still survived. Just that these few years he had changed from his arrogant style. Even in the evil sect, Wandu clan surprisingly kept a low profile. Ordinary disciples could not even see this old monster. Thinking of that, Qinglong could not help but frown slightly. God of Poison, this title, had already resounded throughout the evil sect several hundred years ago. That year when he was still following the previous Ghost King to conquer the world, this God of Poison was already a capable general in Wandu clan, after which he took over the position of Wandu clan head. Even more, in the evil sect's internal strife with the Ghost King sect, who knew how many enmity had been secretly sown, just that he did not expect that with the passage of time, he would actually work together with this old monster. However, Azure Dragon had not seen the God of Poison for close to 100 years. He was rather curious as to how the God of Poison had changed over the years. If he were to calculate his age, this old monster would be close to 500 years old. Thinking of that, he suddenly had a thought. He looked at Ghost King, who was half a body's length ahead of him. He had a faint smile on his face. His expression seemed very relaxed. But no matter how he tried, he could not guess what he was thinking. Along the way, they walked past the courtyard and entered the inner hall. It was quiet all around. Not a single figure could be seen. The place where this person of high status and power resided seemed unexpectedly deserted. Very soon, the two of them saw a seemingly ordinary bungalow in front of them. There were 8 men dressed in the same yellowish-brown attire, and the person who was leading the way also led them towards that house. It seemed like God of Poison should be in this house. When they were near, the 8 men bowed to Ghost King. Obviously, Ghost King, as one of the Falcon's 4 main faction sect leader, his position in the Falcon was extremely high. But Ghost King did not show any arrogance. He nodded slightly to the crowd and smiled amiably. Then, together with Qing Long, they walked in. In this room, there were windows on the east and west sides. Light shone in. The room was very bright. It was completely different from the rumor that the Falcon always stayed in the darkness. Chapter 141. As for the furnishings, it was extremely simple. In the middle of the huge house, There was only a table and a few chairs. Beside the table there was a reclining chair. An old man with a head full of white hair like snow was lying on it with his eyes closed. Beside him sat a fair-faced young man in his early 20s, fiddling with the tea set on the table. The fragrance of the tea wafted over from time to time. No matter how one looked at it, it looked like a peaceful picture of a grandfather and grandson resting. Where was the slightest bit of evil energy? Ghost King smiled and walked over. That old man heard the footsteps, opened his eyes, and glanced at Ghost King. His face immediately revealed a smile and said, "You are here?" Ghost King smiled and said, "Old Senior, it has been a long time since we parted at the Holy Temple. How are you?" This old man was naturally the notorious god of poison. Immediately he seemed to have a bitter smile on his face and said, "I am old, useless." Then he seemed unwilling to talk about this topic again, changed the topic and said, "Ghost King, old brother, now that you're already the head of Ghost King's sect, your status is the same as mine. If you don't mind, you could just call me old brother. Please don't call me old senior anymore. I can't afford it." Ghost King laughed in spite of himself. His expression relaxed, sat down at the other side of the table, and said to God of Poison, "Old Senior, your words are wrong. Who doesn't know that you are a person of virtue and prestige for this big event? We are still counting on you to preside over the overall situation." God of Poison's expression seemed to be stunned, immediately shook his head and said, Can't. Ghost King was about to say something when the young man on the opposite table had already brewed 2 cups of tea, brought it over, and said indifferently, "Sect head, Qing Long Holy Envoy, please have some tea." Ghost King and Qing Long stretched out their hands to receive it. Ghost King took a few more glances at him, saw that this young man had delicate features, just that his face seemed a little pale, but to be able to accompany God of Poison here. Naturally, his relationship with God of Poison was not shallow. Immediately, he turned to God of Poison and said, "This is." God of Poison smiled and said, "He is the last disciple I took in 10 years ago, called Qin Lian. At that time, I saw that his aptitude was not bad, so I took him in." Wien, quickly greet these 2 seniors. They are well-known figures in our holy sect. If you can get their care in the future, it will be better than you cultivating for 100 years. Qinwen lowered his head slightly. His expression could not be said to be proud or shy. Even his voice did not change. It was calm and gentle, softly said, "Greetings to sect head, holy envoy. I was rude just now. Please forgive me." Ghost King laughed and waved his hand. Qing Long also laughed and said, "This little brother is able to become senior god of Poison's disciple. His future is boundless. His future is boundless." The god of Poison chuckled and said to the 2 of them, "The child is not sensible. Please don't be offended." Ghost King waved his hand and laughed. "What are you talking about?" Pausing for a while, he continued, "But senior, today I came here is really sincere to invite you to preside over the overall situation. Our 4 great sects will join hands and together wash away the great defeat of Qing Yun, the humiliation of the Holy Temple." God of Poison was silent for a while. His expression seemed desolate. After a long time he said, "Old brother, my body is already half crippled. I really cannot be of great use. This time our 4 great sects are secretly discussing to besiege Qing Yun. I naturally cannot fall behind. If not, I will let down the Nether Mother Goddess and Heaven Vidyaraja 2 saints, and even more let down the generations of holy sect founders. Just that the position of presiding over the overall situation, I think other than old brother your great talent and bold vision, no one else can take it." Ghost King frowned, shook his head and said, "Senior, you are overpraising me. Among the 4 great sects, my qualifications are the lowest. How can I take up the responsibility? How about this? Wait for Changshan Halzun and Hehuan sect's Samyao Ferry to arrive. Then we will discuss again." God of Poison muttered to himself for a while, said, "That's good too. They should be arriving within these few days. We will gather again then. This 100 years of holy sect's extraordinary shame and humiliation. This time we must get it back from Qing Yun's sect." Ghost King smiled, sat there for a while, chatted for a while, and then bade farewell to Qing Long. God of Poison did not force him to stay and ordered his men to send them off. Leaving God of Poison's residence, Ghost King and Qing Long blended into the crowd in Heyong City. Ghost King suddenly sneered and said, "This old monster is really getting harder to deal with." This sentence was inexplicable, but Qing Long seemed to understand his meaning, nodded and said, "That's right, 300 years ago when our Ghost King sect and one Du clan fought to the death, the old monster was the most ferocious and impulsive, always charging at the front. Even 100 years ago, in that great battle with Qing Yun, it was also him who strongly advocated. Seems like that crushing defeat at that time has worn down quite a lot of his drive." Ghost King shook his head and said, "This is not called wearing down his drive. This is called growing his ability. After that battle, the old monster seemed to have suddenly come to his senses. His temperament changed all at once, keeping a low profile and biding his time. These 100 years, other than our Ghost King sect, the one who recovered the fastest was Wandu clan. Just that he refused to take this seat. It is very troublesome." While speaking, Ghost King frowned and indifferently said, "Never mind. Anyway, we have to wait for those two to arrive before we can discuss the important matter. Let's wait for a few days first." "All right, where is Bai Yao? Today it seems like I did not see her for the whole day." Qing Long said, "I also did not see her, but Yu Ji has always been accompanying her. Nothing should happen, don't worry." Ghost King shook his head, sighed softly, and did not say anything more. Looking at Ghost King and Qing Long's disappearing figures, God of Poison, who had been calm and even had a little benevolent expression, gradually turned gloomy but did not say anything for a long time. As for that young man beside him, his character seemed to be even more eccentric. God of Poison did not speak to him, but he was enjoying himself, patiently brewing tea on the table, without any impatient expression. After a long time, God of Poison suddenly let out a deep sigh and said, "The new waves of the Yangtze River surpass the old." That young man called Qin Wen turned his head and looked at God of Poison, indifferently said, "Oh, that person's skills are very powerful." God of Poison snorted and said, "His skills are naturally extremely high, but no matter how high his skills are, we are not afraid of him. Just that this person is too shrewd. In the future, you must be careful." Qin Wen smiled slightly. His tone was still that calm and said, "I know, teacher." God of Poison looked at him, suddenly sighed, and said, "If those few useless senior brothers of yours have your aptitude, why would I need to endure so many years of suffering?" Qin Wen received God of Poison's praise, but there was no complacent expression on his face. He indifferently said, "Those few senior brothers are doing their best to work for you, teacher." God of Poison snorted, suddenly stretched out his hand, and lifted the blanket covering his legs. He actually got down from the chair and stood up. His stature was actually rather tall, his back was straight. What did he look like he was sick at all? It seemed like those various actions earlier were all to deceive Ghost King, and Qing Long, God of Poison, paced back and forth in the middle of the room. Qin Wen, instead, seemed to be much quieter than his teacher. Only God of Poison's footsteps reverberated in the room. And at this moment, suddenly a strange sound was heard beside Qin Wen. It seemed to be the kind of ear-piercing sound of cicadas chirping in summer. God of Poison's expression changed. He turned his head to look. Qin Wen took out a small yellow box from under the chair, one chi square. That strange sound was coming from inside. God of Poison walked over, stretched out his hand, and gently opened the lid. Shockingly, in front of the both of them, on the yellow soft silk in the box, there was a gorgeous colored centipede, but the most strange thing was this centipede's tail had 7 branches. If at this moment Zhang Xiaofan saw this thing, he would definitely be indescribably shocked, because he had seen this thing before when he was young. It was one of the world's most poisonous 7-tailed centipede. Qin Wen frowned and said, "Ever since we came to the vicinity of Qing Yun Hill, Xiao Qi seemed to be restless, as if she was agitated by something." God of Poison carefully looked at this 7-tailed centipede and then took out a light purple small pill from his bosom, placed it into the box, and then closed the box. Very quickly, that strange sound from the box gradually became softer and then disappeared. After Qin Wen carefully kept the box with the 7-tailed centipede, God of Poison indifferently said, "This 7-tailed centipede is the world's most precious creature. There's only one pair left in the world, and they will always accompany each other until death. if they are separated, but within 100 miles, they will definitely be able to sense each other. Shao Qi these few days is restless. It must be because of this. Qin Huiyin glanced at God of Poison and suddenly said, in that case, now that person is on Qinyan Hill. God of Poison smiled and said, that's right. The seven-tailed centipede is the one and only species in the world. There is no mistake. Speaking, he turned his head and slowly gazed into the distance. Far away, that towering Qinyan Hill outside Heiyang City pierced straight through the clouds, so mighty that it was almost insufferably arrogant. White clouds circling around, celestial air floating. 100 years, in a blink, another 100 years has passed. This old man softly muttered to himself. Chapter 142. Mount Jade, Bamboo Peak. Sha Danan blankly sat in his room, lost in thought. It was a sunny afternoon. The soft light shined in from a window and shined on the bluestone floor. Perhaps it was because of the lazy atmosphere in the air. Big Yellow and Little Gray in the room also appeared to be a little lazy at the moment. Big Yellow was lying at Sha Danan's feet, buried his head on his two front feet. His eyes were half closed, his ears drooped down. Only his shiny fur tail swayed from time to time. And the usually active monkey Xiao Hui, right now, was also leaning onto Huang's body, using De Huang's stomach as a pillow, sleeping soundly with its eyes closed, and its body was also moving up and down along with De Huang's stomach's breathing. This quiet afternoon, everything seemed to be the same as before. Sha Danan's eyes were staring blankly at the unknown place. It was the third day since he returned to Mount Jade. Suddenly, Big Yellow seemed to feel something. He suddenly raised his head, opened his eyes, and even his ears perked up. Sha Danan frowned. Then he heard slow footsteps outside the door. After a moment, the door was pushed open. The sunlight shined in. Sha Danan could only see a figure standing at the door, bathing in the sunlight. After his eyes adapted to the sunlight, his face turned pale. He saw Tian Belize standing at the door with a gloomy face. This was the first time Tian Belize came to see him in the past 3 days. He was also the first person he saw other than Shixiang Xavian who delivered his meals. Most likely the others were not allowed to visit because of Tian Belize's strict order. By this time, De Huang had already run over, his tail wagging, rubbing against Tian Boli's feet, looking very happy. But the other animal, Xiao Hui, did not have such a good impression of him. Instead, it was disturbed from its sweet dreams and looked rather angry. Ji called out twice, but ultimately it knew that Tian Boli was not someone it could afford to offend, so it did not dare to be presumptuous. After calling a few times, she staggered back to Sha Danan's bed, leaned on the quilt, and fell asleep again. Tian Bui lowered his body, looked at De Huang at his feet, stretched out his hand, stroked its head. De Huang barked softly twice, used its head to rub his palm. Tian Belize patted Big Yellow's head, stood up straight, and looked at Sha Danan. Sha Danan did not dare to look at his eyes, whispered, "Master." Tian Belize looked at him for a while, did not answer him, slowly approached. Sha Danan unconsciously took a step back, but Tian Belize did not do anything, only slowly sat down on the chair. Sha Danan's heart was a little afraid, but more than that, he did not know what to do. In fact, since he returned to the mountain, he already expected to face this kind of situation, or even worse, to face more people's interrogation and reprimand. He was already mentally prepared. But in this warm and quiet afternoon, when Tian Bui, whom he had revered like a deity, silently sat in front of him, he could only lower his head, his mind blank, unable to say a word. After an unknown period of time, Tian Bui slowly said, "Lao Chi." Sha Danan's body shook, almost like a conditional launch, said, "Yes, master. Do you have anything want to say to me?" Sha Danan slowly raised his head, looked at Tian Belize. Tian Belize expressionlessly looked at him, could not tell what he was thinking. After a long silence, Sha Danan slowly shook his head. Tian Belize stared at his disciple, his hand in his sleeve slowly clenched into a fist. Just now, Tian Bui spoke slowly, as if this could hide the feelings in his heart. This morning Kaheo from Longsho Valley sent a message, Tomorrow morning, sect head Reverend Dao Xian wants to see you at Tong Tian Peak Crystal Hall. Sha Danan's body trembled. The moment had finally arrived. The cool mountain wind gently blew in from the open door, seemed to bring the sound of the bamboo forest far away. But the people in the room did not feel it. Ash seemed to fall asleep again. Big Yella also lay down again, no longer caring about them. Only Tian Belize was still staring at his disciple, deeply looking at him. In the past few days, did your senior brothers neglect you? Sha Danan shook his head, said, No, Shi Xiang's all treat me well. Tian Belize did not speak. The room returned to silence. After a long time, Tian Belize suddenly let out a long sigh. Like he had made up his mind, shook his head and stood up, without turning back, without saying a word, walked toward the door. Sha Danan stared at the familiar figure, lost. Just when Tian Belize was about to leave the room, he suddenly stopped, but still did not turn back. Sha Danan, startled, called, Master! Seventh. Tian Belize's voice was still calm, but behind it, there was a strange emotion. I ask you one last time, are you really a spy sent by other factions to spy on our Jadian secret arts? Sha Danan bit his lips, slowly kneeled down to him. Master, I am not. I did not do anything wrong to you, he said in a low voice to Tian Bui, as if at the same time to his own heart, so resolutely and decisively said. In the sunlight, there seemed to be a sigh. When he raised his head again, that familiar figure had already disappeared. Sha Danan stared at the door, kept this position for a long time, then slowly stood up, walked to the bed, and sat down. Ash was awakened by his movement, turned its head, saw it was Sha Danan, grinned, like after sleep. Its spirit began to recover, jumped on his Sha Danan's body. Sha Danan subconsciously held Ash in his arms, but his eyes were still looking at the door. After a while, with a voice that only he and Ash could hear, said quietly, You know, I promised that person, even if I die, I still won't say. Not sure if Ash understood, but it obviously did not care, reached out its hand, affectionately grabbed Sha Danan's hair. Sha Danan did not move, lash do anything, only slowly said, Only you, Ash, now only you can accompany me. Shao, we called out twice. He laughed, not knowing if it understood or not, and far away, De Huang seemed to have fallen asleep again. In its sleep, its tail quietly curled up, shrunk under its body. The sun was still gently shining. Amandla, who was standing outside the door, could not help but opened his mouth and yawned. But after a moment, the slight sense of sleepiness disappeared. Tian Belize slowly walked out from Sha Danan's room. Master, Du Baishu called out, carefully watching Tian Bai's expression, hoping to see something from his face. Helplessly, Tian Bui was expressionless, only nodded slightly, walked past him like that, headed towards Observe Silence Hall. Amandla stood aside respectfully, waited until Tian Belize walked far away, looked at his back, thought of Sha Danan, couldn't help but sigh. On Big Bamboo Valley, no one would have thought that this ordinary junior brother would actually have such a thing happen to him. At this moment, even he, who was usually lively and active, couldn't help but feel a little depressed. His heart was more worried for Sha Danan. He was lost in thought for a long time, until a call came from behind, 6 Shi Xiang. Amandla was surprised. He turned around and was startled. Sha Danan came out from the room and stood behind him. The monkey Xiao Hui was lying on his shoulder, grinning at him. De Huang did not follow him out, most likely still sleeping. Xiao Shitty. Amandla frowned, said, What's the matter? Sha Danan looked at him, slowly said, 6 Shi Xiang, I want to go to the back of the mountain. Amandla was startled. His heart was a little troubled, since returning to the mountain, although Tian Belize did not directly order people to monitor Sha Danan, but Shenyang Serene had already secretly told everyone. But at this moment, looking at the usually honest Xiao Shitty's haggard face, Amandla's heart really could not bear it. But no matter what, he did not dare to go against his master's order. After a long while, he murmured, Xiao Shitty, you know now. Aye. Sha Danan quietly lowered his head, whispered, Tomorrow, head Doyle Sherba will let me go to Peak of Widows. I want to see the place again. Du Baishu's body shook, slightly opened his mouth, suddenly without rhyme or reason felt his eyes were hot. The youth standing in front of him seemed to have turned into that ordinary youth many years ago when he first came up the mountain. At the dinner table, he made a bet on who in his master's family would be the first to enter the kitchen. But master's order, no matter what, he dare not go against it. While he was in a dilemma, suddenly heard footsteps. Both of them turned to look. It was Jade walking over with a complicated expression. This was the first time Jade saw Jade in 3 days. Her face was pale, seemed a little haggard. Presumably these days she was also not very at ease, but in this sunshine she was still so beautiful. Jade lowered his head. Jade walked to the front of both of them, facing Amandla, but the corner of her eyes were on Jade and said, "Six Shi Xiao, my dad said. Xiao Fan will not do anything. Let him be." Amandla, startled, Jade's body also seemed to shake, slowly turned to look at the direction of Observe Silence Hall, but only saw the entrance. Tian Beli's figure was not there. Chapter 143. Jade slowly bowed to the direction of Hall of Quietude. His voice was choked with sobs, said, "Thank you, Master." Jade stood at the side, seemed like she wanted to say something, but in the end she did not say anything. She tightened her lips, turned, and walked back. Watching her walk far away, Amandla suddenly said, "No wonder Xiao Shimmy and Dragon Head Peaks, Kevern Shixiang, had a big fight this morning." Jade, startled, said, "What?" Du Baishu said, "In the morning, Kevern Shixiang came over. After talking to Shifu and Shenyang, Little Shimmy pulled him to one side to talk. Unexpectedly, after a few words, it seemed that Little Shimmy said something that made Kevern Shixiang embarrassed. Little Shimmy got angry." Amandla paused, looked at Jade, then said, "I guess she probably asked Kevern Shixiang to ask Vasp Kalo Sherbo for you. That's why they had a big fight." Jade smiled bitterly, did not know what to say. He shook his head and walked to the back of the mountain. Amandla looked at his back and saw the monkey Ash lying on his shoulder, playing with his hair from time to time, looking quite funny. But when he thought of the fate that awaits Jade after tomorrow, he could not help but frown and sigh heavily. Jade had not walked the mountain path from Bamboo Peak to the back of the mountain for a long time. Along the way, he could see the green on the side of the road. Birds were singing from far away. The mountain wind blew on his face, brought a trace of coolness. Following the winding path, it was like he returned to the past. So here really nothing had changed. Even the white clouds drifting far away, halfway up Big Bamboo Valley, seemed to be exactly the same as before. Ash was very happy. It jumped down for Jade's shoulder. Squeak, squeak, ran to the bush, then climbed onto a big tree and began to swing on it. Jade looked at Ash, couldn't help but smile. He remembered the time when he met Ash. The heavy pressure in his heart was lifted a little bit. Walking, Ash was on top of his head, running back and forth excitedly at the top of the tree. But Jade's eyes was only looking at the front, that piece of clear green bamboo forest. How many memories were frozen here? He stopped in front of the bamboo forest. The mountain breeze blew over, and countless black bamboo danced in the wind, making rustling sounds, as if they were also welcoming the return of their old friends. Jade took a deep breath. The fresh, sweet, and free air that only belongs to this place. Then he walked in. The emerald green bamboo forest was just as dense as before. Beneath the tall, verdant bamboos, countless bamboo shoots broke out of the soil and grew freely here. Unknowingly, he once again walked to the place where he used to do his bamboo chop homework. He saw that the originally thin black bamboo now seemed to have become a circle thicker. The shadows of the bamboos danced in the wind, as if they were also crowding around him. The past flooded his mind. He looked at everything around him in a daze, as if he was a little dazed. Jade. Suddenly, a gentle and pleasantly surprised voice rang out from the depths of the bamboo forest. Jade's body shook. The voice was so familiar, but he could never imagine he would hear it at this place. He immediately turned around and looked at the source of the voice. His body stopped. He saw in the shadow of the bamboos, Bailu was wearing a water-green dress that matched with the environment. She was standing there smiling, looking at him with some tenderness, some gentleness. "Why are you here?" After they stared at him like two idiots for a long time, Shah Danan murmured. Bailu slowly walked to him. Even her eyes were filled with gentle smile. She said softly, I am here to see you. Shah Danan was excited. He bit his lips, said after a while, but if someone found you, you will be in danger. Bailu shook her head. I don't care, I just want to see you. Shah Danan's body shook. This was the first time he heard Bailu said her mind so directly. Seem noticed Shah Danan's surprise. Bailu's face also blushed, then said, Your Jadian has been as stable as mountain for 100 years, already let down their guard. No one found me sneaking up the mountain. Shah Danan nodded silently, but then he thought, everyone in the righteous knew Bailu is the daughter of Falcon Vim's faction head. If someone found out he was talking to her again, the result will be unimaginable. Bailu was smart. She could see Shah Danan's hesitation. Her smile was replaced by sadness. She said softly, If you are worried about something, then I will leave. Shah Danan looked at her. Although Bailu's face was filled with joy, it could not hide the haggardness. These days, it must be because she was worried about him. Suddenly, his heart warmed. He blurted out, What can I worry about? Can I be worse? Bailu, startled, looked at him. Shah Danan smiled bitterly, said, It doesn't matter. No one will come now. You talk to me. Bailu smiled, nodded. Okay. But after saying that, the two of them looked at each other, but they didn't know what to say. The atmosphere suddenly became cold, and there was a faint sense of awkwardness. After a while, Bailu said, Idiot, say something. Shah Danan scratched his head, but his mind was blank. He really did not know what to say to this beautiful girl. Coincidentally, from the corner of his eye, he looked to the side and saw a thick black bamboo lying on the ground not too far away. It had probably decayed over the years and had fallen off. He walked over and said, Sit down. Bailu laughed like a blossoming flower, incomparably beautiful. When she was about to sit, Shah Danan suddenly pulled her, said, Wait. Bailu, startled, said, What is it? Shah Danan bent down, used his sleeve to rub the black bamboo. He rubbed a clean area, then stood up. He did not look at Bailu, lowered his head and said, You sit now. Bailu took back her smile. Her lips moved. Her pair of bright eyes looked at Shah Danan's figure. After a while, she slowly sat down, then pulled Shah Danan and said, You sit too. Shah Danan blushed, said, I can sit on the ground. Bailu pulled him to sit on the bamboo, said, Tell you to sit, then sit. Why are you sitting on the ground? Shah Danan smiled embarrassedly. He could feel the faint fragrance around him, floated into his nose, into his heart. He could not help but turn to look at her. Bailu was also looking at him. Her eyes were like water, filled with unspeakable gentleness. He never noticed, even when they were trapped in Bloodrop Cave under Forsaken Abyss. Shah Danan did not feel he was this close to her. After a while, he suddenly said, Bailu. Bailu smiled. What is it? Shah Danan stared at her, said, Why are you so good to me? Bailu, startled, slowly moved her eyes to the ground in front of her. Her face was also slightly confused, said, Yeah, why am I so good to you? Above their heads, the bamboo leaves were gently swaying in the mountain wind, like it was saying something. My family, and what happened in the past, you know about it, right? After a while, Bailu said quietly. Shah Danan nodded lightly, said, Yes. Bailu slowly said, My mother was gone when I was young, and my father was busy with the important matters of the holy sect. He didn't have time to take care of me. People around me were always smiling at me, flattering me, because of my father. Shah Danan was silent for a moment, then said, Your dad actually cares about you. Bailu nodded, said, Yes, but I did not understand before, until I met you. She stared at Shah Danan, quietly said, Shao Fan, the days in Bloodrop Cave, I will never forget it for the rest of my life. Her voice at this moment seemed a bit far away. So in the darkness, even when I am about to die, I can still find someone to rely on. Shah Danan was touched, but did not know what to say. A jade-like hand stretched out. Bai Yao gently held his hand. From her soft skin, there was a faint gentleness. She took out a handkerchief from her bosom, gently wiped the stain on Shah Danan's sleeve when he was cleaning the bamboo for her. Since young, don't know how many people flatter me, gave me many rare treasures, but she raised her head, stared at Shah Danan's eyes, said softly, even if all the treasures in the world are placed in front of me, it cannot compare to the sleeve that you used to clean the bamboo for me. At that moment, all the sound in the world suddenly disappeared. Only the gentle eyes of the beautiful woman surrounded him. Many years later, when you look back, can you still remember that time? There was someone who whispered to you in his heart. The words that were filled with naivety and fanaticism because of youth, can you still remember? Like deeply engraved in your heart, a vow that will never give up. Have you ever opened your arms, hugged the person you love in your arms? Don't know when it started, in that gentle silence. He opened his arms, tightly hugged the beautiful woman next to him. Chapter 144. The shadow of the bamboo swayed. The broken sun shined down on the empty ground in the bamboo forest. Shah Danan looked at the bamboo forest far away, said quietly, "Actually, sometimes I also feel I am very stupid. Shiji clearly likes Kevern Shixiang, but at that time, when I saw her standing in front of Kuei Nyo, I don't know what I was thinking, I just rushed forward." Bai Yao leaned against him, suddenly said, "If I was in danger, would you save me like this?" Shah Danan smiled awkwardly, scratched his head, said after a while, "I also don't know." But after a pause, he thought carefully, said, "Probably." Bailu smiled, glared at him, then turned her eyes to far away, quietly said, "If you are in danger, even if I use my life to exchange for yours, I am also willing." Shah Danan was surprised, turned around, and looked at her. Bailu's calm face did not seem like she was joking. He murmured, "What did you say?" Bailu smiled, then suddenly thought of something, said to Shah Danan, "Xiao Fan, come with me." Shah Danan frowned, said, "Go where?" Bailu said, "Anywhere. The world is so big, we can go anywhere. If you're not willing to join our holy faction and become enemies with your masters, then we will not join. We will travel to the ends of the world together. If you stay in Jadian, with the temper of those old antiques, you will be in danger." Shah Danan became silent. Bailu looked at him worriedly, waiting. Finally, Shah Danan looked at her. Bailu was about to say something, but Shah Danan slowly shook his head. "No, I will not leave Jadian, Bailu." Bailu's face darkened, said, "Are you going to wait for death here?" Shah Danan was silent for a moment, said, "Bailu, if you don't know, Jadian is my home. I was raised by Master and Shenyang. I cannot abandon them." Bailu said angrily, "Your master scolds you every day, and you still say they are good?" Shah Danan stood up, smiled faintly. "Bailu, perhaps I am a bit stupid in other people's eyes, but I can still see these things. Although my master has always been strict, he treats me really well. I know that he treats me sincerely." He said in a low voice, "Everything that happened now is actually my fault. I lied to him, so I deserve to be punished. However, I definitely cannot betray the sect." Bailu was startled for a while, suddenly sighed, said, "You are not stupid. You are very smart. No wonder my father always told me that although you look dull, you're actually very smart." Shah Danan, startled, blushed, said, "Your dad said that about me?" Bailu smiled but did not answer, walked to his side, said, "I know your character. I can't force you to leave, but now you have our holy sect's rare treasure and also have connections with Sky Song Temple. It is really very dangerous. Have you thought about what to do?" Shah Danan smiled bitterly, said, "Let fate decide." Bailu stared at him, said softly, "Hope nothing happens to you." Shah Danan smiled, looked at the sky, said, "You have been here for a long time. Better go back quickly in case something happens. If we are fated, see each other again." Bailu's body shivered. Shah Danan's heart was also a little bitter. He was not sure what the result of tomorrow's trip to Peak of Widows will be. He turned around, slowly walked out of the bamboo forest. After he walked for several yards, he suddenly heard Bailu's voice came from behind. "Xiao Fan, I want to ask you something." Shah Danan turned around, surprised. "What?" Bai Yao seemed to be hesitating, but eventually still said, "That time in the forest outside of Laguna Collective, you once saw an ancient well on a full moon night. I want to know, what did you see in the ancient well?" Shah Danan, startled, asked curiously, Why do you also want to know this? Bailu was a little nervous, said, Just say it. Shah Danan frowned. What is so strange about that ancient well that you all are so interested? Bailu smiled and did not answer. Shah Danan was about to say something, but then he thought of something. His face blushed again. He did not say it. After a while, he said, I will tell you the next time we meet. Bailu startled, then smiled. After all, from what Shah Danan said, he was not willing to be controlled by the faction. She smiled, said, Okay, you must remember. Shah Danan chuckled. After talking with Bailu, his mood became much better. He was much more relaxed. He waved his hand to Bailu, then turned and walked out of the bamboo forest. Not far away, Ash jumped down from the top of a bamboo tree and landed on Shah Danan's shoulder. He turned around and looked at Bailu. Deep in the bamboo forest, Bailu stared at the figure that was getting further away, motionless. The next day, early morning, when the humid mountain air was still floating above Big Bamboo Valley, the Big Bamboo Valley people had already woken up. Tian Belize and Serene slowly walked to the open ground in front of the Hall of Quietude. Everyone was already waiting there. Shah Danan was standing at the last position among them. Tian Belize said lightly, Darren, you take 7th. Others don't need to go. Xavion nodded in response. The others' faces revealed disappointment. Only Tian Linger stood up, said to Tian Bui, Dad, I also want to go. Tian Belize frowned. What are you going to do, cause trouble? Tian Linger clenched her teeth tightly, looked at Suru with pleading eyes, called out, Mother. Surin sighed, said to Tian Belize, Forget it, let her go. Tian Belize frowned, finally nodded reluctantly. He did not look at her anymore, looked at Shah Danan, said, Let's go. With that, he flicked his sleeve and flew away on his celestial sword. Suru followed closely behind him. On the ground, the disciples gathered around. He dodgy coughed, said to Shah Danan, Shao Shitty you be careful. These days, Shah Danan saw his Shixians showed concern for him for the first time. He was touched, whispered, Yes. Xavion sighed, said, Shao Shitty, let's go. Shah Danan answered, walked to Xavion's side. He could not help but look at Hede. She was also looking at him. Her eyes were filled with concern, but she did not say anything. Shah Danan once again stood on Xavion's back, rose into the air, straight into the sky. Looking at the sky that was getting bluer and bluer, it was as if everything was like the beginning of the Seven Peaks tournament. Only, it was not as exciting as before. Peak of Widows, towering into the clouds, still so ethereal, still so untainted by the mortal world. It was like it also opened its arms, welcoming their arrival. Xavion brought Shah Danan and Hede and landed on Cloud C. At the Crystal Hall, at the peak of the mountain, there seemed to be a distant bell ringing. Tian Belize and Surin could not be seen. Most likely they had already gone to Crystal Hall. But above Cloud C, there were many main houses and disciples from other houses. When they saw Xavion and others, there was a commotion. Many eyes turned to Shah Danan. Countless whispers could be heard above the sea of clouds, drifting back and forth like the drifting mist. Xavion and Hede's face were tense, pretending to ignore the eyes of the people around them. After a moment, a person walked out from the crowd and walked toward them. Shah Danan looked at him, recognized this person. It was the main house disciple Chong Jian, whom he met last time at Peak of Widows. He was also the person who fought with Xavion in Seven Peaks tournament. Xavion also recognized this person. Seeing him walking over, he cupped his hands and said, Chong Shixiao, I trust you have been well. Chong Jian quickly returned the greeting, but from the corner of his eyes, he still glanced at Shah Danan a few times, then said, Song Shixiao, just now Tian Belize's Sure Shu had already arrived here, specially instructed me. Once the few of you arrive here, let me lead you directly to Crystal Hall. Xavion nodded, said, Then I will trouble Chong Shixiao. Chong Jian smiled faintly, turned sideways and said, Then please follow me. Then he walked first, Xavion, Hede, and Shah Danan followed behind him, passed through Cloud Sea, passed through countless Jadian disciples' eyes, came to the side of Rainbow Bridge, and walked up. At this time, the first beam of morning sunlight finally shone into the world, gently sprinkled on Peak of Widows, on the clear water on both sides of Rainbow Bridge, in the layers of ripples, a beautiful rainbow emerged. Shah Danon took a deep breath, looked into the distance, that boundless heaven and earth, like an incredible giant picture, and he, after all, was only a small ornament in it. They walked like this, walked all the way across the Rainbow Bridge, came to the side of the Jade Pool, and also saw that wide flight of stairs leading straight to the Crystal Hall, just that they did not see Qin Yin's sex spiritual beast water unicorn. Most likely it was still in the Jade Pool. Dang! In Crystal Hall, at the top of the mountain, there seemed to be a clear sound of a cauldron. Chang Jian smiled at them, said, "Almost there, let's go." Xavion answered, but could not help but look at Shah Danon, saw Xiao Shidi staring at the top of the mountain, expressionless. Chapter 145. This place was far quieter than Cloud Sea. Along the way, there were not many Jadian disciples, except for a few young Taoists who were cleaning. They greeted Chang Jian when they saw him. One step, one stare. Shah Danon slowly walked up. The higher he went, but for some reason, he felt his heart was getting heavier and heavier. That ethereal place ahead, the closer he got, the faster his heart beat. An unknown and inexplicable nervousness shrouded him. And what was waiting for him? What would it be? At Peak of Widows Crystal Hall, another distant bell ring was heard, drifting between the peaks, at the foot of Jadian Hill, at a secluded place, for people stood side by side, 3 males and 1 female, quietly looking at Jadian Hill. After a while, the oldest god of poison suddenly smiled, said, "Can't imagine that in my lifetime I will still be able to return here." Vim Wang, who was standing beside him, smiled faintly, said, "With Senior Yu in charge, not only can we return here, after a while, even if we reach the Peak of Widows, it will not be surprising." God of Poison immediately shook his head, smiled, said, "Vim Wang, old brother, didn't we already discuss this time's big event? Yangzi of Changshan Hall will be in charge. We are just pawns." Then he turned his head and said to the man at the other side, "That's right, Yangzi, old brother, he. One of the 4 main evil faction sects, Changshan Hall's head Yangzi." His eyebrows reached his temples. His appearance was extremely handsome. He looked like a man in his early 30s, but actually he was an evil faction cultivator who had cultivated for hundreds of years. In the evil faction, Changshan Hall was a very special branch because all along it was this branch that was responsible for guarding the evil faction's most important sacred place in Wildlands, the Holy Temple. And this branch's purpose, just like its name, was to pursue immortality. Just that they were one of the 4 main evil faction sects. When doing things, they were unscrupulous, completely opposite to the good faction's path of seeking immortality. This will be discussed in the future. This time, the evil faction secretly came to Jadian Hill. Yangzi arrived here. After a few secret discussions, he was elected as the person in charge of the evil faction's big event. He could not help but feel proud. He smiled and said, "Jadian Hill has been bullying our holy faction for hundreds of years. Today we must seek justice from them." The Ghost King laughed. "Well said." After speaking, he turned his head and faced the girl who had been standing at the side, who was the only female sect leader of the 4 major sects. Samyao Fairy of Hehuan's sect smiled and said, "In a while, we will also have to see Fairy's marvelous Taoist skills." Samyao Fairy came from one of the most disreputable Hehuan sect in the evil faction. Her appearance was extremely beautiful, but she did not have the slightest lustful intention. Her face was indifferent, without any makeup. Instead, she had a kind of frosty beauty, similar to Lu Sweki from Small Bamboo Valley at Qinyan Hill. Hearing Ghost King's words, Samyao Fairy smiled faintly and said, "The 3 brothers are all important people who have seen the world, far surpassing a little girl like me. Just that we have all made a heavy vow in front of Holy Mother Ming Wang. This time we must work together to wipe away the humiliation of the Holy Temple that year. I hope the 3 brothers will put aside the past enmity together. Do not disappoint the vow." The 3 of them looked at each other, said, "Don't worry, Fairy. We have no other intentions." Samyao Fairy smiled and then turned to Ghost King, said, "Ghost King, brother, I have been here for a few days. Why don't I see my niece?" Ghost King was surprised, said, "You were talking about Bai Yao, that girl. The child is playful. Don't know where she went. I wonder why Fairy is looking for her. Samuel Fairy indifferently said, It is nothing much, just that I recently heard that your daughter has obtained a treasure. It is the rare treasure He-Huan Bell passed down by Lady Jean Ling. Is there such a thing? God of Poison and Yangzi were slightly moved. Obviously Lady Jean Ling this name. Even to them who were the evil faction's overlords, they had no choice but to treat it seriously. Ghost King's countenance changed. An indistinct glint flashed in his eyes, said, I wonder where Fairy got this news from. Samuel Fairy stretched out her jade-like hand, gently combed her hair, expressionlessly said, Naturally I heard it. Ghost King brother, Lady Jean Ling is our He-Huan sect senior founder 800 years ago. The He-Huan Bell that she left behind has always been our He-Huan sect's treasure. This, I believe you also know, right? Ghost King did not speak, but stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his bearing dignified, without a trace of retreating. The harmonious atmosphere just now, in a blink of an eye, turned into a state of mutual hostility. Yangzi coughed once, glanced at God of Poison. Unexpectedly, God of Poison turned his head, gazing at the distant Qingyun Hill peak, obviously not wanting to meddle in other people's business. Yangzi secretly cursed in his heart. If it was in the past, he himself would also be eager for these two big enemies to fight to the death first. But now that his identity was the one in charge, he could only take a step forward and said, Both of you, why did you get angry while talking? Both of you are also enlightened masters, and now that the important matter is before us, why not first suppress this matter? After this matter is over, both of you can settle it yourselves. What do you think? Samuel Fairy glanced at him, nodded slightly, and looked away. Ghost King was expressionless, but in his heart he was sneering. This Yangzi was really not a good person. Due to his own identity, he had to persuade, but indistinctly after the important matter, he had the intention to incite the two sects to fight each other. But that He-Huan Bell was really not a trivial treasure, along with Ghost King's sect's Hidden Dragon Cauldron, Blood Forger Hall's Sinister Orb, and Du Clan's 10,000 poison returned to sect bag. It was known as the evil sect's 4 great treasures. Furthermore, there was always a rumor in the evil sect that many of He-Huan's sect's strange skills all used this He-Huan Bell as the medium to bring out the greatest effect. This kind of precious treasure, no matter how stupid Ghost King was, he would not be willing to hand it over. And after Bailu obtained this treasure from Blooddrop Cave under Forsaken Abyss, he specially ordered her to keep it a secret. But he did not know that Samuel Fairy's supernatural power was not small. She actually found out about this matter. At this moment, Ghost King had thought of everyone around him, but his face revealed a smile, said, Yangzi brother is right. We might as well discuss this matter after this matter is over. Yangzi saw these two people who were usually arrogant actually listen to his words this time. His heart could not help but feel proud again. At this moment, God of Poison suddenly said, the sun is out. Everyone heard and looked at Mount Jadian. As expected, they saw a red sun was shining brightly, slowly rising from the top of Mount Jadian, shedding sunlight onto the world. The warm sunlight also shone on the 4 of them, drawing out a long shadow behind them. After finishing the last step, Sha Danon finally came to the outside of Crystal Hall again. This tall and solemn hall stood in front of him, majestic, people standing in front of it like they were ants. Duan Jian said, Let's go in. Xavion and Hidi nodded. Sha Danon was about to step forward. Suddenly his body shook, his eyes looked to the side, saw at the other corner of the stairs, leaning against the railing, there was a person sitting on the ground. His clothes were still clean, but because he was sitting on the ground randomly, there was some dust on the hem, a pair of eyes staring blankly at Sha Danon, his mouth muttering something. It was Uncle Wong, who had been crazy for many years. Sha Danon's heart was sour. When he was about to walk over, he was pulled by Xavion, whispered, Xiao Shidi, we should go in first. Don't let the masters wait for too long. As for Uncle Wong, wait for you to come out. Then it is not too late to visit him. Sha Danon stopped. His heart was sad, but he knew what Xavion said was the truth. He was now a sinner. He nodded, forced a smile at Xavion. Duan Jian saw it, whispered, Both of you, if there is nothing, let's go in and see the masters and seniors. Xavion agreed, walked forward with Sha Danan. Hidi frowned, said, Masters and seniors? Chang Shixiao. Is there any other faction's seniors who came? Duan Jian hesitated, said, Yes, Skysong Temple sent several holy monks. Besides, there's also Incense Valley seniors. They all came to ask us about Zhang's shitty situation. Tian Linger turned pale. Her face turned white. Xavion's brows were tightly knitted together. Sha Danan quietly walked forward, said, Chang Shixiao, let's go in. Duan Jian looked at him, nodded. Okay, you two follow me. Then he walked in first. Sha Danan took a deep breath, took his heavy steps, followed in. Behind him, Xavion and Hidi looked at each other, saw the anxiety and worry in each other's eyes, but at the same time, there was also helplessness, could only follow. Just when they entered Crystal Hall, Uncle Wong, who had been sitting in the corner, saw Sha Danan's figure, saw Sha Danan disappeared into Crystal Hall. For some reason, he also stood up shakily, scratched his head like a child, and actually also walked into Crystal Hall. These few years, Wang Ershu had always been taken care of by Qingyun's sect. His madness had never been cured. He spent his days wandering around Tongtian Peak, even this sacred Crystal Hall in the eyes of ordinary Qingyun disciples. He often went in, but he had never caused any big trouble. After a long time, no one bothered about him. At this time, he actually walked in smoothly, disappeared from the Crystal Hall. Chapter 146. Stepping over the door sill, a solemn atmosphere immediately greeted them. The most sacred place in Qingyun's sect was still as majestic as before, making one exclaim in admiration. In a large hall, there were many people standing and sitting. But for some reason, the first thing Sha Danan looked at was not these people, but at the deepest part of the hall, looking at the three clear statues far away in the shadow. In front of the hall, the lighted candles were silently burning. Wisps of smoke rose. In the middle of the hall, on the main seat, the highly respected, sage-like Master Doilshin sat there. Next to his seat, there was a small tea table. On the table, it was Sha Danan's esper, the fire stick. In the row on his right were the heads of Jadian's various branches, including Tian Bui. All of them were sitting there. The elders and disciples of other Jadian houses, either sitting or standing, were all behind them. As for the familiar people, Kevern, Bei, and others, they were also there. Anan was silently standing behind Master Shueyu. Next to her was Bako, whom Xavion admired. Her bright eyes were staring at Sha Danan's figure. On the left side of Master Doilshin, there were many people Sha Danan had never seen before. There were kindly-looking monks, gloomy-looking old men. Among that group of people, Sha Danan could only see a few familiar faces. Skysong Temple's Fezan and Fashion were also there. They were respectfully standing behind an old monk who was sitting at the highest position. It seemed like this kindly-looking old monk was most likely Skysong Temple's holy monk. Nona brought Xavion. Sha Danan and Hidi bowed to Master Doilshin, said, Master, Bamboo Peak Zhang Shidi has arrived. The surrounding people were stirred. Their eyes all turned to them. Not only Sha Danan, even Xavion and Hidi were a little uncomfortable. Serene, who was sitting next to Tian Belize, frowned, said to them, You all stand here. Xavion and the rest heaved a sigh of relief, responded, and walked over. At this moment, Master Vaskalo, who was sitting above Tian Belize, suddenly coughed. Tian Bai's facial muscles twitched. The corner of his eyes also slightly twitched, but finally, still coldly, said, Lao Chi, you stand there, sect head reverend, and the elders have something to ask you. Sha Danan had just stepped forward, but it was like he hit a wall. He stopped. After a while, he said quietly, Yes. Xavion and Hidi looked at each other, then looked at Sha Danan. Their eyes were filled with worry, but they knew it was not the right time, so they obediently stood behind Tian Belize. Reverend Daoxian expressionlessly looked down. Between the two sides of the crowd, a young man stood there alone, his eyes slightly nervous and fearful. Even his hands were tightly clenched into fists. Was this really the ordinary orphan from the Grass Temple village? Deep in his heart, he sighed. Sha Danan. Master Doilshin slowly called. Shah Danan's body seemed to tremble, slowly knelt down, whispered, "Disciple is here." Master Doyle Shin looked at him, said, "These elders next to you are all the masters of our righteous. Today they are also here for you. This is Skysong Temple's master, Puhong Holy Monk. Sitting next to him is also Skysong Temple's holy monk, Pukong Master, and Incense Valley Shangwan." Master Doyle Shun could not be disrespectful. Naturally, he had to say all the famous people's names, but Shah Danan did not have the mood to continue listening. For a moment, his eyes fell on the two benevolent-looking old monks sitting at the front, that red monk robe with golden threads, white eyebrows like snow, at this moment was also looking at him. Puhong Holy Monk was the head of Skysong Temple's 4 great holy monks in the world, together with Jadian's master Doyle Shun and Incense Valley's master, was one of the 3 great masters. His position was very high, far from what others could compare to. Normal cultivators wanting to see him was already extremely difficult, but this time he unexpectedly broke the 100-year rule. Using the supreme carriage, arrived at Jadian Hill. Not only Shah Danan was surprised, even Jadian, who received the news, was also very surprised. From this, it could be seen how much importance Skysong Temple placed on the great Brahmin wisdom, which appeared unexpectedly. In the main hall, Master Doyle Shun's voice stopped. It was silent. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the figure kneeling on the ground. Shah Danan slowly lowered his head, stared at the green bricks in front of him. Deep in his heart, suddenly faintly thought, "These monks, are they the same as that Puji?" Far away, the fire stick lying quietly on the tea table next to Master Doyle Shun seemed to sense its owner's thoughts, lightly flashed with green light. "Shah Danan," Master Doyle Shun slowly said, "now I will ask you a few things you must answer honestly." Shah Danan said quietly, "Yes." Master Doyle Shun seemed to be considering his words. After a while, he slowly said, "This trip to East Sea Billows Hill, Skysong friends pointed out that when you were fighting with Koane Nyo, the incantation you used was the great Brahmin wisdom that Skysong never divulged to outsiders. Is that true?" Shah Danan did not say anything. The atmosphere in Crystal Hall seemed to be a little tense. Tion Belize uncomfortably turned his head, but found everyone was silently staring at Shah Danan. In the air, there seemed to be something invisible lightly beating. After a while, Shah Danan's voice slowly said, "Yes." "What?" Immediately, the hall was in an uproar, although they had expected this answer. But after Shah Danan said it, Skysong Temple monks were still excited. Only Pukong, including Fezan standing behind them, their faces did not change at all. They were silent. And over at Xinyan's sect, Tian Bai's expression became more and more ugly. Tian Linger and the rest's faces were also extremely pale. In the midst of shock, only Anan looked at that silent figure, did not say a word. Reverend Daoxian frowned. His eyes glanced slightly at Tianyin Temple Puhong Holy Monk, but saw that in the crowd of disciples' agitated expressions, Puhong Master instead slowly closed his eyes, clearly indicating that for the time being he would not speak. Master Doyle Shun snorted coldly in his heart, turned to Shah Danan, raised his hand to signal the noisy crowd to be quiet. His identity, after all, was not a small matter. Very soon, no matter Qingyin's sect or other sects figures, all quietened down. Reverend Daoxian unhurriedly said, "Other than that, someone said this fire stick in your hand." While speaking, he stretched out his hand to pick up that black stick, continued, "On it there is the evil faction, evil object, sinister orb. Is it true?" Another moment of silence. Shah Danan quietly said, "Yes." This time, everyone surprisingly kept silent. Sinister orb, such a bloody and evil word. It actually appeared on a Jadian disciple. Master Doyle Shun's face gradually darkened, said, "Do you have anything to say?" Although Shah Danan had already expected today's situation, but his mind was still blank. The fear of the unknown punishment made his body slightly trembled. I, like a desperate little boat struggling in the sea. He blankly said simple words, but did not know what he wanted to say. Master Doyle Shun's face was serious, said, "Where did sinister orb come from?" At the end, the voice suddenly rose, the tone turned sharp. Shah Danan was shouted by him. His mind buzzed, a moment of confusion. He finally opened his mouth to speak. At the beginning, the rest of the words naturally followed, from being played by the monkey Ash when he was young, to being chased by Hede, to the valley behind the mountain, sinister orb, and the strange black stick suddenly fighting each other, and finally turned into this shape. In the main hall, everyone looked at each other, even Master Doyle Shun, Pu Hong, Pu Kong, including that Shangwan elder from Funxiang Valley, all frowned. The matter of sinister orb and soul absorbing orb using blood as a medium, it was the first time for them cultivators to hear of it. It could be seen how big the world was. There were indeed all sorts of strange things. There were also quite a number of people who had doubts, but looking at Sha Danan's slightly dull eyes, his expression disappointed, it did not seem like he was lying. Master Doyle Shun pondered for a moment, then looked at Sha Danan, said, "All right, I will believe your accidental smelting, but before this, Sinister Orb was already with you. You were just a little child. How can you have this kind of evil item? Also, Sinister Orb has always sucked the blood of living things, and at that time it had not been smelted with soul-absorbing orb. How can you be safe?" Sha Danan was speechless. The real reason the matter was naturally that Puji used Buddhism true way to temporarily seal Sinister Orb. And that day Puji also told him to find a remote cliff and throw it away. But it was Sha Danan himself who kept the orb as a souvenir. And now, saying Puji naturally meant saying everything, but it was in Sha Danan's heart, deeply unwilling to say it. That benevolent old monk actually had only one night of fate with him. He only called him master when he was at the end of his life, but for so many years, no matter what, he could not forget that person. In that instant, it was as if the surrounding people's gazes, voices, all became so far away. The scene in front of him seemed to have returned to many years ago. He faced that old monk. The young boy stubbornly and firmly said to him, "I know. I will not say even if I die. 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 Speak." A loud shout. The sound reverberated everywhere. It was Tion Belize, frowning tightly, stood up angrily, startling everyone. His face was extremely stern, but the worry in his eyes was getting heavier and heavier. What Sha Danan had already admitted was a great offense against Jadian and the good factions taboo. According to common sense, most likely he must die. Tion Belize was surprised and angry, but this little disciple did not seem to know his life was at stake, especially when Skysong Temple and Incense Valley people were here. Even if Jadian wanted to protect him, there was nothing they could do. If this continued, Sha Danan's little life would really be in danger. But Sha Danan, at the moment like being possessed, slowly lowered his head, did not say a word. Others were still fine, but Serene and the rest of Bamboo Peak people who watch him grow up were all speechless. Sha Danan's character was always silent and tenacious. Right now, at this crucial moment, it seemed like he would not say anything regardless of anything. Tion Belize suddenly stepped forward, but before he could say anything or do anything, Skysong Temple's Pu Hong holy monk, who had been silent all along, suddenly opened his eyes and said, "Tion Benefactor, we can slowly discuss the matter. Do not use violence." Tion Belize was startled, did not expect Pu Hong Master would suddenly speak up for Sha Danan. But Pu Hong Holy Monk was highly respected. Even he, as the head of Jadian branch, did not dare to disrespect his intention. He could only snorted and sat back down. Reverend Doyle Shun glanced at Pu Hong, frowned, seemed to have some thoughts, then said to Sha Danan, "Also, your great Brahmin wisdom, where did you learn it from?" Once the words came out, everyone immediately tensed up. The crux of this matter vaguely involved the current good factions, two big factions' secret undercurrent. This answer must be earth-shattering. But Sha Danan, still silently kneeling there, did not say a word for a long time. Reverend Doyle Shun's pupils contracted, coldly said, "You still won't tell the truth?" From the beginning to the end, Fazan, who had been watching Sha Danan, suddenly lowered his head and no longer looked at him. Even Pu Hong and Pu Kong, who were sitting in front of him, at this moment also looked at each other, their eyes flashing, not knowing what they were thinking. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.